Good morning, everyone. Welcome. We're so glad that all of you guys could join us today. If you haven't joined us before, this is our conference that we host every year. I'm Taylor Hicks. I'm the Information Security Officer with CFSB. We get the pleasure of partnering with Murray State every year to do this conference, and it is such a pleasure. We love that we get to be a part of this and bring great speakers in from all over the country every year. I just love coming here every year. Seeing everybody that I've seen in the past years, seeing new faces, it's always great. We're going to be getting started in just a moment. You guys are going to have just another minute. I know we're a little bit past what it says on the agenda, but we're about to take off. I do have one thing that I wanted to mention to you guys real quick. A couple people, as they were coming in, noticed that a few people had backed into parking spots in the parking lot. The way they're doing parking now, they do drive-through with a license plate reader. If you are backed into a spot and they can't see your license plate, you are at risk of getting a ticket. So wanted to mention that to all you guys real quick. We're going to start in about 5 minutes. If you guys need to turn around real quick and avoid that, feel free to do so right now. We'll be back in just a minute and we'll get started. Thank you guys. Great to see you all.
fine, you're fine. All right.
All right, welcome again. We noticed there were a few people that took off running after Taylor talked about the parking. Well, my name is Michael Ramage. I am the director of the Cyber Educational Research Center here at Murray State University, and welcome back to Security Matters. As I look around the room, many of you I have seen over the years at Security Matters. Some of you have been at most of the Security Matters. Some of you are coming for the first time, and we certainly appreciate it. This year is extra special, at least to me, because we haven't been able to do this in a couple of years. So it's nice to be able to get back together and see faces in person that we haven't seen in a while. Also, because of this year and it being so weird, we wanted to make sure that we streamed it as well. So you'll be able to go back and watch this online. You'll notice that I didn't tell people that we were streaming it until yesterday, and that was on purpose. A couple years ago, we hosted a conference here, and we promoted from the get-go that we were having it in person, and we were going to be streaming it online. And our students did not want to walk across the bridge to come over here. Instead, they watched it online. So I thought that if they planned it long enough in advance, then they would show up and not stay in their rooms. So look at them sitting on the front row. So that's fantastic. You'll notice that this day is going to run in a way that we have run it for a long time, but there are also going to be a few changes from the way that we have done it in the past. And one of the ways that we're going to change is that we'll still have a luncheon when we're done. We'll still have a break. And let me say, we got plenty of food out there. So please, on our break, go get a cup of coffee, get a Danish. You'll help us out. We don't want to have a lot of leftover food. But we'll also have a great lunch, and we'll be back in the ballroom for our lunch. And during our lunch every year is when we do our awards. We hand out several awards at lunch. And I'll be the first to admit that unless you're receiving an award, sometimes it takes a long time, because we want to make sure that we recognize the recipients properly, and we also want to make sure that that we do it in a way that doesn't take an hour and a half. But it's hard to do that. So what we decided to do this year is do something a little bit different. So there's going to be a handful of awards that are given out throughout the day. Instead of all of them being at lunch, there's going to be the majority of them given out before our speakers. And second part of that is that not only are they going to be given out before our speakers, but they're going to be given out by students. By our students are going to do that for us. And so we thought that would be a nice touch. But the students that are presenting the awards will share a few notes about the speaker, or I'm sorry, about the recipient. But then what I will ask, and those recipients don't know that I'm going to ask this yet, is that in the days ahead, that we schedule some time to record a video that we could share through our social media sites about your background. And I want to share a little bit about why you're so deserving of the award that you're receiving. So that's a little bit about the way that we would like for this to do. If you're not willing to do a video, then that's fine. Some of you, I'll make you do a video. But others, that's fine. But I do want to make sure that we give you an opportunity to share a little bit about your story, because each of the recipients this year have a fantastic story to share. Along with our speakers. Our speakers have great stories to share this year as well. We have our slate of speakers that are ready, that are going to be sharing a different aspect of security, and frankly sharing it in a way that I think will be very unique this year, and I'm really excited about. So I hope you enjoy the speakers today. But last thing I'll say We've been in this room before. As I said, many of you have been here before, so you know where the restrooms are. So I don't think I need to go over that. You know where the ballroom is. It's right there by registration. If you have any questions at all today, find me, find Taylor, stop by the registration or the CFSB table, and we'll be able to help you. This event, we always have this discussion about exactly how many of these conferences we've done, and I don't know that number is ever perfect because we've done so many of them, and we keep expanding and we keep changing and we keep adding to it every year. So, but needless to say, it's more than a dozen, and it's exciting that we've been doing it for that long. But with that, let me bring up our first cybersecurity network management student, Matt Doyle, and he's going to share our first couple of awards.
Hello and good morning. My name is Matthew Doyle. I am a senior cybersecurity and network management student here. I'm initially from the St. Louis area, and when I graduate, I will be moving to Nashville, Tennessee to work as a cybersecurity technical account manager for Titanium. Today, first, I'll be presenting the Dick Anderson Leadership Award and the Gary Brockway Faculty and Staff Excellence Award. So the first award I'm going to be presenting today is the Dick Anderson Leadership Award. This award is presented to an individual that has made significant contributions to cyber by their leadership, technical, and management skills. This year's Dick Anderson Leadership Award winner is John Truitt. Mr. Truitt is the CEO of Relentless Contenders, a new startup focused on setting up arenas around the multi-state region focusing on esports. While he has stepped away from his company to start a new company, Mr. Truitt is also the co-owner of Kaleo Technologies. There are several examples of Mr. Truitt's leadership qualities and servant heart. Mr. Truitt previously served on the Paducah Economic Development Board of Directors, finishing up its chair. Mr. Truitt also currently serves as the board of directors for Sprocket in Paducah, whose mission is to connect entrepreneurs with innovation, talent, customers, and capital. Finally, Mr. Truitt has served on the Murray State Cyber Studies National Advisory Board for more than 15 years. Congratulations, Mr. John Truitt. Please come forward to accept your award. The second award I'm going to be presenting today is the Gary Brockway Faculty and Staff Excellence Award. This award is presented to a faculty or staff member for excellence in teaching, research, and community service. This year's Gary Brockway Faculty and Staff Excellence Award winner is Mr. Brandon Dixon. Mr. Dixon has been an instructor within the Cybersecurity and Network Management program for nearly 4 years now. Before that, he was a network engineer here at Murray State. Brandon has a bachelor's degree in computer science, a master's degree in telecommunications systems management, and is an offensive security certified professional. Mr. Dixon does a fantastic job of bringing his real-world networking and security experience into the classroom. The person who nominated Mr. Dixon noted that he cares so much for his students inside and outside the classroom. The person even went on to say that he cares so much that he's teaching one of his students how to drive. Congratulations, Mr. Brandon Dixon. Please come forward and accept your award. Our first speaker today is Andrew Murrell. Andrew is the Senior Vice President and Chief Information Officer with Community Financial Services Bank and co-host of Security Matters. His talk is titled How to Move from Disasters to Solvable Problems, Tips for Disaster Prevention, Preparation, and Response. It should be very interesting and timely. In his role as CIO, Andy coordinates the bank's information technology team and IT infrastructure. He has been involved in every major IT project since he joined CFSB, including the analog to Cisco voice over IP phone system conversion, server virtualization, and architecting the network for the corporate building. Please welcome Andrew Murrell.
All right. Thank you. Awesome. Let me get everything up here. Grab a glass of water so I don't pass out. All right. Well, good morning. Thank you for joining us. I hope you all had plenty of coffee and donuts because we're going to go deep into business impact analysis, continuity planning, tabletop exercises. Are y'all excited? Nah, I wouldn't do that to you this early in the morning. No, but really, my name's Andy Murrell, as you've already heard. I've been with the bank for over 19 years, and in that time, I've had the opportunity to be a part of several disasters, many close calls, and countless prevented disasters. First, I guess we'll talk about I want to share some tips and some concepts that we've learned along the way that maybe you can take with you to help you out no matter where you are in your IT career. So, let's get started. Benjamin Franklin once said, "An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure." This statement was true in the 1700s, it's true now, and it'll be true in the future. The best way to respond to a disaster is to simply not have the disaster in the first place. Now, don't get me wrong, we can't prevent natural disasters. We can't prevent human error, squirrel attacks, software and hardware failures. Which, by the way, squirrel attacks are very serious. They eat a lot of fiber networks and have caused us some downtime occasionally. Little side note there. But the thing that we can do is put processes and procedures, products in place that allow us to be flexible when disasters happen. And the amount of things that you put into place are proportional to your tolerance for downtime. You know, some companies, they may estimate their downtime to be, $1 million an hour. Others, they can tolerate being down for 24 hours and nobody's affected. So there's no right answer, but you have to sit with your team and determine what makes sense. What are you trying to achieve for your customers or what you do in the marketplace? Some preventative measures cost little to nothing at all. For example, testing your backups. You come in one day, everything's a nice sunny day, and all of a sudden you have a server crash. Well, no problem. We'll just go to the backups and restore that server, and everybody will be happy. Well, you get in there to restore the server, and you discover that the backups have not been successful for over a month. Now you have a disaster. And, or you are a company that's responsible for processing payroll for 20 companies, and your internet goes down, construction crew 30 miles away dug up your fiber. Well, no problem. We'll just go to the other internet connection. Well, you go to use your other internet connection, and you discover that that network is also down because, hey, wait, we've never tested that we haven't tested that connection in over a year, and the router that's connected to it is down. Again, now you have a disaster. And specifically in that type of case, it's not just a disaster for you or your company. It's a disaster for the hundreds, if not thousands, of people that may not get a payroll check on time because nobody checked the backups. Another critical concept is don't panic. It sounds really easy, when everything's nice and calm, we're sitting here talking about it, but it gets a little more difficult when you realize there's a problem. The phone starts ringing off the hook. You start getting texts or emails. People start coming into your office. Everybody's trying to figure out what's going on. How long is this going to last? Here's how it affects me or my business process. Well, the first step is to take a deep breath, realize this is probably going to be unpleasant, but because hopefully you've given yourself options, you'll get through it. And hopefully at the end, you'll have a good story to tell. A lot of times these things pop up. It's not what you had planned for that day, but you just have to roll with it. It's just a point in time, and a calm head is able to resolve a lot of issues. Okay, so now you're calm, starting to get into the issue, figure out what's going on. Now, assemble a team. And depending on the size and scope of your disaster or problem, that determines the type of team that you assemble. If it's a localized thing, okay, we can handle that. We might just grab a person in IT, it's like, hey, can you field the calls? Can you keep the calls off of us so that we can focus on the problem? Just doing something like that really helps a lot. Kind of takes a lot of the stress, as mentioned in the previous example, when people are coming into your office and calling, and just keeping that off. Some disasters, you may need to get a lot more people involved. You may need your HR team, your operations team, just the people that you need to really solve the issue. If you have too many people, it can get muddled. If you don't have enough or the right people, then you may not meet all of your objectives or have all the right voices in the room. Let's see here. Okay, so the other one key person on that team also. Sorry, I'm kind of public speaking is not my my first forte here, but that's okay. Okay, you have your team. The next step is identify the essence of whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish for your business. And it could be different things on different days. So you have to be in tune with what you're trying to do. Again, is it a day when you're running payroll? That's pretty high on the list. If you're a regulated organization, what are your regulatory requirements? Those have to be the first thing you do. For a lot of our disasters, the bank, our response, for a lot of the disasters that we've been involved in, they revolve around natural disasters. And so there's one thing that's clear in every single natural disaster that we've been in, and that is cash is king. We have to be able to get ways or provide ways for our customers to get access to cash. They may need to buy a generator. They may need to buy food, supplies, whatever. But cash is the most important thing. You know, next time there's a disaster or something, and you go to that parking lot where there's a guy that has a trailer load full of generators, try to buy one of those generators with Bitcoin. It's not going to happen, more than likely. So, another example of that, back in the 2008 snowstorm, which, you know, that was a very, very big event for our region. One of our key objectives was to get cash to the people. And at that time, we didn't have a generator that supplied power to the entire building there at 5th Street in Benton. That was before our headquarters was constructed. So our security officer and I got together. We hatched a plan. We go to the hardware store, buy a 100-foot roll of Romex, and make a giant extension cord. Now, we decided to use Romex because we didn't want to burn the building down. That was the appropriate wire for that. You don't want to go, daisy chaining a bunch of, little small gauge extension cords together. And we had a big extension cord running from one end of the building to the other for several days. But the objective was met. People were able to get cash. All right. Well, all right. So you're doing the thing. Communication. Communication is another very critical part of the response. Everybody is wanting to know what's going on. How long is this going to last? And the best way to prevent miscommunication or wrong information is to, with your team, come up with a unified message. Designate one person that will be giving that message. Nominate one person that is one or two people, depending on your organization, that is permitted to talk to the media. It could be very bad if the media started interviewing multiple people and everybody gave their opinion of what they thought happened, and sometimes differing opinions of what happened. Well, that gets out to the different outlets. Now you have a PR problem. So the best thing to do is avoid that altogether. Make sure all of your team members know the honest but canned response that they're to give when the media or others ask what's going on. It's really, really important. All right. You're feeling good because you have a plan, you have options to fix what's going on, you're calm, you have your DR team, you have clear objectives, you're actively responding to the thing. As you're going through, in the heat of the moment, you are trying to get things up and going. You're making changes. Take just a second, document everything you do. Before you start messing with that router or switch or firewall, do a quick, show run. Put that in a text file. Keep it off to the side, because I promise you will need it. If you're working on other things, do screenshots. Put all that in a folder. Keep it ready to go so that if you make a configuration error or it's time to go back to normal, you can do it without any issues. But probably what goes above and beyond all that, during the heat of the moment, for absolutely no reason can you compromise security. Again, in the heat of the moment, things can get misconfigured. Sometimes there's a temptation to take shortcuts, to bypass security protocols. And this will cause you more grief and headache than the actual event itself, more than likely. So if your options are make something available but it's unsecure, or not make it available at all, don't make it available. All right. So at this point, we've pretty well gotten through the disaster. We've restored services. Immediately, bring your DR team back together. Go through what worked, what didn't, lessons learned. What can we do better next time? What do we need to purchase? Document all those things. And then have a follow-up meeting shortly after that to verify that the ball is rolling on the new processes or procedures, or that whatever you need is being purchased, so that you're prepared for next time. And, more than likely, the next event will have similar elements, but it'll be a completely different thing. So, that's why going back to be flexible, put in processes that give you options. Last but not least is the human aspect. For years I've been to conferences, sat through countless meetings, gone deep on the business impact analysis, continuity plans, and that is all critically important. But one thing that's not usually spoken about is the human aspect. We're dealing with people, real people, during a disaster, and all of our human frailties come to the surface when there's a disaster. Nerves are raw, tempers can flare. People may be on an emotional roller coaster. You never know what people are dealing with. Don't be surprised to see some tears occasionally, because, again, there may be their loved one lost their house, or they lost their house, or who knows what's going on. But the biggest thing is, do your best to be extra kind at this time. Take an extra second and just acknowledge people. Everyone will greatly appreciate it. And by the end of the day, the reason we put so much work into doing the boring business impact analysis, doing the inconvenient testing, writing out the procedures, implementing all of the prevention measures, is because we as IT professionals do our best to deliver data security, data integrity, and data availability, so problems do not become disasters for our customers or team. So let's talk for just a second about the tornado. And honestly, our response to the tornado began years before with the redundant internet circuits that we had put in place, the things that we had built into the building at Graves County, even things like the cell booster that we put in that building, the big display, every single thing, process, plan, the aforementioned, came into play during this event. And, you know, there are so many stories that came out of that horrible event, many heroic stories, tragic stories. But I wanted to kind of tell just a quick story from the CFSB IT perspective. So, like everybody else, we've been watching the news throughout the week, and as the week progressed, the weather reports continued to get more dire. We actually had our IT team Christmas party scheduled for that day, and by that afternoon, we had decided to cancel it. Everybody was super bummed, but you know, we felt like that might be the best thing to do. Little did we know that within a few hours, lives would be absolutely turned upside down. So, you know, like many of you, my family was glued to the Channel 6 news, and we were making preparations. I was really hoping that this was not going to be bad, because my wife and I had planned an anniversary getaway to Nashville for Saturday and Sunday. Well, needless to say, we didn't make it. We soon realized that this was really bad, and early on, we had begun a text group with our DR team. Within an hour of the event, of the tornadoes rolling through, we were already beginning to formulate plans. And, you know, by later that night, most of us were without power and had spotty communications. So several years ago, we had made an agreement with the local emergency management services so our facility in Graves County could be used as a base of operations in the event of an emergency. Well, within the first hour of the thing rolling through, the EMS services were already needing access to the building. And the very first thing that they were asking for, you know, we had one of our team members, a person from the Graves County Banking Center, who literally dodged power lines and trees being down to drive to the banking center to ensure that the emergency services could get in there. After they were in there, the first thing that they requested was internet service. Now, we had redundant circuits there, but due to the amount of destruction around, both of those circuits were down. But the generator was humming right along, so they could get in there and go ahead and start setting up operations. Meanwhile, several of the service providers, AT&T for example, worked to set up a mobile communication tower at the building so that the EMS could start doing their job. Let's see here. Well, we all got together the next morning, super early. I remember driving in, the sun was coming up, and immediately began to start assessing the damage. You know, the absolute simple ping command is your best friend when things like this happen. Just to establish, what can I get to? What can we not get to? Well, you know, I was working on some of it. Our other IT team members were working on part of it. We were trying to come up with a determination of where we were. Once we had some of that information, our DR team that, you know, consisted of, you know, representation from accounting, operations, HR, marketing, operations, facilities. They were all there, and with the information that we had, began to start formulating a response. And again, what the main objective was for that Saturday was to get people cash. So we tried to get up some strategic ATMs and maybe 2 computers per location. That was our marching orders, and that's what we set out to do. Our designated communications person, she was able to get the message out to Facebook, and through our alert media system, we were able to communicate what was happening to our team members so that they would know if they needed to come in late or come in at all. Another aspect of it is having a good relationship with your vendors. You know, your vendors a lot of times are your strategic partner in getting things done. And I just want to give a special notice to Paducah Power and Brent Shelton, wherever you are out there. Him and his team, I think they may have gotten 4 hours of sleep within 72 hours. One of the key determinations was the corridor between, on 641, between Dreyfusville and Benton, is where several of the service providers have their main lines ran. Well, that area took a direct hit. And in fact, if you ever drive through there or have driven through there in the past, that landscape will never be the same. So, because of rules and regulations, you can't just go and start drilling holes and setting poles, even though you have the people and equipment there to do it. They had to work through the channels. So in our best estimate at that time, it was going to take a few days to get our primary communications up. So we began working on our backup plan. However, by the end of Saturday, we had largely accomplished our goal of getting people cash. The next phase was to get the more permanent services up. We had our IT team members, again, working directly with the Paducah Power MuniNet crew. Late Saturday night, they were there, just literally working with them, shining a light down the fiber, and then the other crew was out in the field trying to find where light was coming out so that they could splice it or run new wire. I felt so bad because my team was, over there in Graves County. It was late. I think they actually sent me a picture of a ketchup packet because that's all there was to eat at the building. I wanted to drive out there and get them some food, but, there was a curfew in Graves County. There was roadblocks. In fact, there's nothing open. So they powered through it. And, by the end of that night, they were able to get services restored to that building, which really allowed the FEMA crew to kind of start taking off. We had a dedicated IT team member that was working with FEMA and the EMS services to make sure they had everything they needed. We were involved in setting up phones, helping them set up switches, setting up other equipment so they could do their job. And we were super happy to do it. There were hundreds of people represented there. Police, fire, military, FEMA. It was an amazing effort. And to see the level of organization that happened, you could walk into the room and by looking at someone's vest, determine who they were with and what their function was. That is disaster efficiency. They had a makeshift network set up where, and every station had a tag as to what their function was so you could walk in the room and know where to go to get the specific information or help that you needed. I was standing there with the on-site FEMA director and looking out at this scene, and he commented that none of this response would be possible to the level that it is without communications. Cellular, fiber, even analog, everything got tested. So that's some of it. Now, another part of this was, again, the human aspect. Being in the Graves Banking Center that first week, it was somber, but optimistic. There were people there that had not had power in days, others that had family members that had lost homes, others that had lost loved ones. There was raw nerves. There were tempers flared. You occasionally saw tears. But everybody was there to support one another and to serve our customers. Rain had started moving in. Right after the event, it was eerily clear. A few days later, rain started to move in. Several of us got word that one of our team members was trying to salvage some things out of his house before the rain so they could get it to a storage unit in Paducah. We were in a good position. Several of us broke away and helped out with that. And it was at that moment that you kind of step back from the disaster a little bit, from the response, and kind of take in the full devastation of what's going on. It really struck me. We were standing in this gentleman's living room, and I was looking out through the wall. It was just insanely humbling. But, we were able to do it. And the other thing that was going through the back of my mind as someone that's responsible for, our infrastructure is this was about 4 miles away from our headquarters in Benton. I was thinking, what if we had taken a direct hit? What if this had just been a few miles to the east? We'd be having a very different conversation. But I feel confident that we would have made it through it. So that's kind of just a high-level overview of our story. I wanted to leave a little bit of time for questions and, thoughts, comments. Anybody have any? Yes, sir.
What's the number one thing that you, after having gone through this, the number one takeaway that your team took that said, here's what we're going to plan, prepare for the next event?
I would say communications. We're actually purchasing some satellite phones because during this event, when text was spotty, we actually resorted to driving to people's houses to relay information. It was really, really challenging. Another thing is, sometimes when you sent text messages, as part of the DR text string, the messages came in out of order because of the issues with the network. So another thing we decided to do is when you send a text, put your own timestamp on it. Like, hey, the network is up at this point. We can communicate to 3 locations. December 12th, 4:42. That way, even if things do get out of order as they come in, you'll still be able to get a timeline of what happened. I would say the other thing is having extra equipment on the shelf ready to go is insanely critical. Having your VPN infrastructure where it can support an extra load, having your Duo licensing where you can bring people on immediately, going through the testing, those are some of the huge takeaways. What else? Oh, yes, sir.
What was the biggest challenge in this disaster for you guys?
Well, honestly, I would say the biggest, I guess we'll look at it in two different parts. The biggest, I would say overall, was the human aspect. You know, it was pretty severe. You know, some team members couldn't come in. There were people that really needed a lot of help. So working with the human aspect was a big component. From a purely IT side, I would say trying to determine how far do you want to go. How many backup internet circuits can you possibly have? You know, I think one thing I'm super excited about and we're going to implement as soon as it's available is the Starlink. Because, you know, cell services can be down, fiber can be cut. Yeah, there are a lot of problems that can happen down here, but if your satellites have got shot out of the sky, well, we got way bigger problems than any of us can handle. And again, I think that was kind of the biggest thing. You know, everything that we do now is software defined. It requires communications. Anymore, it's not an option to, you can't even legally do some of the things the way you did it even 10 years ago. You have to have connection to the internet. What else? Yes, sir.
I'm loud enough, Michael.
Nope,
Thank you.
nope,
That's
no, you're
all.
not. Nope, you gotta,
I'm gonna have to.
you're loud enough in here, but it's also streaming online.
I understand. Thank you very much for the information. I'm teaching in my class right now. It's contingency planning and disaster recovery. And as you said, it's not the most exciting thing that you teach, but I'm glad that you brought so many things. So my students now know why that is important. And everybody has a plan, and someone said until they're punched in the face, right?
I almost added that slide.
I think Mike Tyson is
Yes.
attributed to it or someone else there. But in your, you mentioned that it was close to the headquarters. Did you all have a business continuity planning? That do you have another site? I know, for example, CSI, I use that as an example, that they have a mirror site, and it's a hot site that they can continue business functioning. Do you all have that, or is it like more a cold site or warm site that you can continue business if that headquarter was to be impacted with a tornado, for example?
Yes, we absolutely do. Depending on the service that we're working on protecting, we have, different strategies. For our core banking, that is replicated to Branson, Missouri. So, if, God forbid, something happened, we still have the core information. We do have another location that is kind of a warm site. We have data that's backed up to it. We have communications equipment there, separate firewall, separate internet connections. So we do have those things in place. And the other part of it, the old saying, practice like you're going to play. We really do. We're regular, by regulation, we have to test stuff. And we have a very in-depth business impact analysis. We have a scheduled testing with restoring critical services, critical servers. One other thing I didn't put in the slide, but it's really important as kind of related to this, is dependency testing. Because awesome, you're laser focused on getting one server up. Well, cool, you got the email server up. But the switches are down, the routers are down, the firewall's down. You just have an orphaned server. So it may be more beneficial to try to get the VMware environment up. Because if it's up, you have 100 servers up. Work on getting the communications up, because then everybody can get to those services. But yes, we have a business impact analysis that's several pages long, and you can't plan for everything. It is just, sometimes you can get caught in what I call the what if loop. What if this happens? What if that happens? Well, you just gotta solve for the 80% and make sure you have, again, spare equipment, spare internet connections, and that you know how to use them. Having agreements in place with service providers. You have to make a plan for what if I'm incapacitated? What if half of my team is incapacitated? The people that know how to configure the routers and switches. We have an agreement in place with the service provider that they can step in. The other part, oh gosh, I could talk about this all day, but I'm really a big fan of building things with as few customs as possible, because in the event of an emergency, if you're tied to things that are very maybe specifically tied to a piece of hardware or tied to a particular thing, you've kind of taken away a lot of your options. I like top quality, industry standard things that are configured in industry standard ways so that anybody could come in and step in and help us out and get the bank going.
If I can add to that question, the interesting thing about the hot site is that's great for people that are away from here. So you all have customers that are not just in the path of the tornado.
Absolutely.
But, our street was split in half, and we were spared, but half the houses on our street were destroyed or severely damaged. And no matter if you had that hot site or not, the people that were most impacted by the tornado in December, it wouldn't matter if that hot site was there. We still couldn't get to it.
Yep.
I mean, once you got off at the Walmart exit in Benton, at the CFSB exit in Benton, you were in actually, that's not even true. Probably about the time you got to Draftonville, you were in a black hole. And so it didn't really matter if there was a hot site somewhere else or not. Going back to the ice storm example as well, the whole region was dead.
Yep.
It didn't really matter if that hot site was somewhere else anyway. So it's the Starlink idea, some of those other things are, at that point, priorities certainly changed. And, when you see your neighbors pulling everything they can literally get out of their house down the street, it starts to be different. But it's those services to the people that are most impacted. It's the getting cash.
Yep.
It really is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right.
We got time for another question or two if somebody has it.
All right. Well, Thank you guys so much. I'm so glad I went first because every other presenter will be better. But again, thank you. Take care.
Maybe. Hello? Okay. All right, so before we transition to our next speaker, we got to do some giveaways. I told everybody that asked we would do giveaways after each speaker. So first of all, before we do this, I've got to ask, did everybody get a blue ticket when they registered? Who didn't get a blue ticket when they registered? And here I am trusting people to be honest. Anybody else? Before we do this, I'm going to share one other thing about Andy's presentation. It really is, I mean, after the ice storm happened, there was a lot of people that made changes to their disaster recovery planning, and there's a lot of things that changed, and everybody said this will never happen again. This is a one-time thing. And you know, the tornado, it was historic. It's never been a tornado with a path that long, and it'll never happen again. And last week, another tornado went across our street. So it's just like my girls are ready to move to Florida or somewhere else. They're ready for a house with a basement or a tornado shelter. But this worst case scenario happens and it'll never happen again. So there's so many times that we'll just, okay, it's happened, we got through it, we won't have to do it again, and then it happens again. So it really is one of those things to, the lessons learned from that. And actually last week on Wednesday when the tornado came back through, I was speaking at Mayfield Middle School that day to some students, and it was amazing. Not amazing. I mean, you could have predicted it, the number of parents that were checking their kids out early and they were getting out of Dodge. It's just that, you know, that memory will be there for a long, long time, and it'll be there with my family for a long, long time, and we were spared. But, all right, so everybody's got a blue ticket. All right, I've got a bunch of shirts that I will draw 2 shirts, and you can come up and tell me your size after we get done. I won't make you yell your shirt size out loud. I do that to high school kids, but maybe I won't do that to you all. But then the third one I'll draw is some earbuds, wireless earbuds. So we'll do that too. All right. All right. First one. 127. I think everybody's 127. 099. And I will say, not just because it's Wes, but I'll leave your ticket in there for the earbuds because it is t-shirts, not as good as an earbud. But all right. 127105. All right. Look at that. All right, y'all come up when I guess I should ask. I hadn't looked at your all's number. Nobody else wants to claim they have 099 and 10. No, I'm just kidding. Hopefully you all wouldn't lie to me. All right. Earbuds. $095. All right. Congratulations. Do I need to look? All right. So often, I just assume the number's correct because nobody else is arguing that they won. But anyway, well, we're going to get right into another speaker, if you all are okay with that. And let me. And then after we finish this presentation, and Lauren, before you come up, we're going to give out a couple of awards again. But we'll have a break. We'll have time to do a little bit of networking, and we're doing good on the schedule. So we'll have an opportunity for a bathroom break after this, and do a little bit of networking. So hang tight. But we will, before we do that, we'll give away some more earbuds and more T-shirts. So you want to stick around for that, and Lauren will do a fantastic job. But anyway, so let me introduce Mason Purcell, another one of our cybersecurity network management students who's going to help out with the next couple of awards.
Hello, my name is Mason Purcell. I'm a senior C&M student here at Murray State. I'm from Keville, Kentucky, and I graduate this May. After graduation, I plan to move back into the Paducah area and find a job to apply my skills. I will be presenting 2 Cyber Studies Distinguished Alumni Awards today. One is for a bachelor's graduate and one is for a master's graduate. This award is presented to a cyber-related graduate that has brought credit to themselves and Murray State University. The alum has to have graduated at least 5 years ago. This year's Distinguished Alumni Award bachelor's winner is Wes Kerr. Wes Kerr is a Henderson native, a 2005 graduate of our TSM program, and currently serves as Senior Manager to Technical Services with Connected Nation in Bowling Green, Kentucky. Wes is responsible for outreach to and data collection from state, multi-state, regional, and national broadband providers while managing operational duties of the Connected Nations Engineering and Technical Services Group. Outside of work, Wes is a leader in his church and has served on the Murray State Cyber Studies National Advisory Board for more than a decade and serves on the Technology Council of West Kentucky's Board of Directors. Congratulations, Mr. Wes Kerr. Please come forward and receive your award. This year's Distinguished Alumni Award Master's Level winner is Chris Royce. Mr. Royce is a 2016 graduate of a master's degree in TSM and serves as Dean of Business for South Central Kentucky Community and Technical College. Previously serving as Assistant and Associate Professor, Mr. Royce has taught computer and information technology at the community college for more than 12 years, providing leadership for their entire division. Not only have we always heard great things about his teaching abilities, but students continue to share about how nice and helpful he is. Last year, Mr. Royce began serving on the Murray State Cyber Studies National Advisory Board. Finally, one interesting tidbit, Mr. Royce was in the first online class offered about 20 years ago. Congratulations, Mr. Chris Royce. Please come forward and receive your award. Our next speaker is Lauren Prohl. Lauren is the manager of Global Defense, Marsh McLennan. Her talk is called Proliferation of Ransomware and the Impact of Geopolitical Events. Lauren is a 2015 graduate of Murray State University's TSM program and an experienced incident responder and threat hunter who has helped identify and mitigate cyber adversaries in Fortune 500 networks. She has led investigations ranging from data breaches to targeted attacks and continues to focus on defining some part of the limitless unknowns in cyberspace and making cybersecurity less abstract and more tangible. She currently holds GCIH and GREM certifications. Please welcome Lauren Prohl.
Oh man, who's wooing for me? Don't upsell me. Thanks, Willem. Thanks, everyone. It's been a minute since I've been back at Murray here. What we got with the clicker situation? How can I advance? What is doing this? All right, we're just doing this. All right, hey everyone, I'm Lauren Prohl. I cannot take credit for this title. This was all Michael Ramage, so thank you for setting up some boundaries and guidelines for me, making me look a lot smarter than I actually am. We're actually gonna be talking about the general threat landscape today and the proliferation of malware and what geopolitical events mean to you all. Before we do that, real quick, I'm gonna be shouting. Quick introduction, as they mentioned, I graduated from sweet old Murray State in 2015 from the TSM program. Wes Spencer is the reason why I'm in security, so you can blame him after this talk. I went to go work as a security analyst at an MSSP, so I've seen the gambit of customer environments. Students, I was in the exact same seat you were today, almost 8-10 years ago. I don't want to date myself too much. Worked my way up through a whole bunch of technical positions. Now I am the manager of global cyber defense at Marsh McLennan. Hello, Marsh McLennan folks who are tuning in. That is a very fancy title to boil down saying that I run threat intelligence, threat hunting, security orchestration and automation, and our security operations center. It's a great time. I get to put all my skills to use, and I get to see a couple Murray State grads grow in their careers, which is super rewarding. In between all of that, I wrote a book on Security Plus test prep. I was featured in Tribe of Hackers Blue Team, and I also work with SecKC, which is a Kansas City security organization. I help run parties. We do little conferences, tons of fun stuff. For those of you who attended in person today, congratulations. I have a couple copies of each of those books if you come see me. Students, I would prefer to give those to you as you're coming up in your career. Make sure you come have a conversation with me, though. It's not just going to be a freebie. When I'm not doing any of this in front of a screen, I am running very long trail miles, very slowly, in hopes that I never see a computer again, and you'll see why here shortly. So let's talk about our agenda real quick. I want to level set for those of you who are in these seats, for those of you who are tuning in. You don't have to do anything on taking notes. I've got a GitHub prepared with all of the links, all of the information, everything that you will need. I will give it to you at the end of this. You can go there. It is like over 100 links. There's tons of recommendations. I gathered the top 10 recommendations from security professionals that I know for what you can do. If you can only do 10 things to protect yourself from ransomware, what should you do? We've got that on the GitHub. So relax, enjoy the talk. Let's make this fun. First things first, we're going to talk about the general threat landscape and what that means for you all here in Western Kentucky, Missouri, Ohio, River Valley region, right? We're also going to be talking about the proliferation of ransomware, why it's become such a problem and why you should care about it, besides the fact that you might get ransomed and extorted, right? We'll talk about geopolitical shifts, and then we'll have some time for questions. I do tend to ramble a lot, so if we run out of time for questions, come find me. After the talk, I'm happy to talk about anything that we covered here and or any other curiosities, or you can find me on social media, and we'll have that again at the end of the slides here. All right, so how am I defining the threat landscape for this? The threat landscape is different for everybody. It depends on your industry. It depends on where you are geographically located. It depends on what time period we're talking about. The threat landscape for a .com company in 1999 is very different than someone in Western Kentucky in 2022. So we're actually going to be talking about the global threat landscape because these are things that apply to you all too, and are things that you should be preparing for students as you come out into the world and start becoming security practitioners, business owners as you start expanding your operations, security professionals as you start working with global companies and participating in contracts. We are talking about threat trends in 2021 and 2022. There is not enough data. We're only 4 months in, so I cannot predict the future for you. But we'll talk about where we're going based on what we've seen last year and this first quarter. We're also going to be talking about cross-industry trends. There's a lot of different businesses that operate in this region. A lot of you will go work for different companies. You might be working for Tim's HVAC company. You might come work for Marsh McLennan, and we are very different threat profiles. So we're going to talk about things that matter to both of us and why they matter. Then we're going to talk about major trends, findings, and then also the opportunities that you all have, everyone in this room, to address these threats, to address these trends. You might be like, all right, that's great, Lauren, but I don't trust just your word, right? How do we actually find out about all of this, right? Who defines the threat landscape for us? That's great, because we've got a ton of folks who do. Thank you, FBI, thank you, MITRE, thank you, CISA, thank you, European Cybersecurity Agency, and thank you to all of the vendors on this slide who provided me the data. I have read all of the 2021 and 2022 global threat reports from these vendors for you, and I have pulled out everything that matches across the board. So that's what we're going to be hitting on today. All right, so key landscape findings. I'm just going to shout here. If you can't hear me, I'm sorry. We will talk about this later. First things first, attackers are using primarily open source tools. And when I say open source, this is not open source in the traditional development means. This is tools that are on GitHub that any attacker can go grab and use. These are common attack tools. We'll dive into what this means more in a second. Number two, supply chain attacks are on the rise. This is super important for everyone here because you may be the victim of a supply chain attack or you may be the target of a supply chain attack. We'll talk about why both of those matter. Number three, vulnerability exploitation is on the rise. In 2021, we set a record for the number of new vulnerabilities discovered and announced. It's very difficult because we set a record in 2020 and 2019 too, because it's only getting worse. This is a game of multiples, folks. The more vulnerabilities there are, the higher likelihood that someone is going to want to exploit them. Going into number four, financial gain is still the primary motivation for most threat actors. And we'll have a big caveat here. For most threat actors that pertain to the organizations in this room or where you folks are going as students. And last but not least, our peace day resistance. Ransomware is still the greatest threat is posed to an organization. And we'll add in here also extortion, right? Ransomware is encryption, but we've got double and triple extortion now. And we'll talk about what you can do to actually address some of that. There's a lot of words on a slide. Again, these slides will be available after, so don't feel like you need to take all of the notes right now. So when we talk about open and common attack tools, these are tools that my lovely red teaming colleagues have put out in GitHub for security research purposes, and the attackers have decided, hey, I like that, I'm gonna go use that. For the red teaming folks, it's great, right? We need to understand how attacks work, we need to get out in front of things, but it's a shame that attackers have said, hey, I'm gonna take advantage of this and go after it anyway. So what types of tools are these? If you've heard of Mimikatz, that is an open source and common attack tool. Cobalt Strike, it's $3,000 if you want to go purchase Cobalt Strike, by the way. Very low barrier to entry for an attacker. And when we start talking about what ransomware groups are making per year, you'll see why that $3,000 number is important in a second here. Bloodhound, Powersploit, Metasploit, all of these are tools most of you in this room, including students, could go download now, put them on a virtual machine, and go watch some YouTube videos and you know how to use them, which means your friendly attacker in a Russian mom's basement knows how to do the same thing. Okay, so if this is expanding, right, and people are using open source and common attack tools, what does that mean for us as security practitioners and for the security industry? Number one, attribution is super, super hard. For a threat actor, the number one thing they want to do is make money, right? How do you make money? You attack more victims, you get more people to pay. How do you do that? You stay running as long as possible without someone finding out who you are. If I'm looking at a Cobalt Strike beacon right now, and it's in English language, they're using a virtual private server in the United States, as long as they don't make any missteps by like making the file name in Russian or something, I couldn't tell you if that is someone on my team, someone in Russia, someone in North Korea. It's very hard to tell the difference at our levels. Now, we've got some folks from the TSM program who have graduated that are doing work to identify these attackers on a grander scale, and that's awesome. Love them for that. I cannot do that. And we're seeing that work start to come to life and impact the industry a little bit more now. Number two, attackers want to make a whole lot of money, right? So when you're using open source and common attack tools, you make it very easy for threat actors to say, hey, I know how to do that, and go from one threat actor group to another threat actor group to another, to another, to another, another, right? So it would almost be like if, we're just going to call him Vlad, he's our bad guy today. No pun intended or anything like that. Vlad works for a ransomware gang, and he says, hey, we use Mimikatz, we use Cobalt Strike, we use Bloodhound. Okay, awesome. And then another threat actor says, hey, I'm starting a new ransomware gang, and I need some 1099 contractors. By the way, 1099s don't exist for threat actors. This is just to help your understanding, right? And Vlad says, you know what, I'm gonna go do that in my evening hours, and I'm gonna go help them out. And he gets there, and that ransomware gang number 2 says, hey, we use Mimikatz, we use Cobalt Strike, we use Bloodhound. Perfect. There is a lower barrier to entry. There's less of an onboarding time, which means more victims, which means more potential payout. Okay, so this is all great. This is all terrifying, right? Yes? No feedback? I'm taking your silence as agreement that you're thoroughly scared. How do we defend against this? Okay, so make sure you're using enterprise security tools. For Tim's HVAC company who has 2 employees, this is only an example of a tool, but Microsoft Defender is built in to the Windows operating system. It works pretty dang well now. That might be all you need plus O365, right? Cloud email. That's okay. For some of you larger organizations, make sure you're using tools that have been trusted and tested in industry. You do not need best of breed. You don't even have to pick the vendors that I just showed you on the last slide, but take a look at what's out there. Make sure you're doing your POCs, make sure you're testing, make sure it matches what you need. Number 2, block known risky registrars, TLDs, stuff on the internet that you don't use. We're gonna go back to Tim's HVAC. Tim's HVAC only does business in Missouri, Illinois, Tennessee, and Kentucky. Why does Tim's HVAC need to allow connections to China? Probably don't, right? This doesn't work for everybody. If you're a global company, if you operate around the world, this may not work. But for some of the smaller organizations, this is a really good first step. Just reduce what is exposed to you. Up here, we've got a couple of the top risky TLDs. This is from Palo Alto Networks in 2021. They did a survey of all of the net flows that they saw from risky domains for malware, command and control, and ransomware extortion callouts. So, and I can attest these are fairly risky that I've seen over my time in my career. These registrars right here, these are the top 3 registrars that Sophos saw hosting Cobalt Strike beacons last year. So if you want to, ASNs, not registrars, if you want to block those ASNs as well. If you don't do business in China, that might be helpful. For you students out there, understand how these tools operate. Security professionals, you should know that too, but as we work these investigations over time, you kind of get a feel for it. Students, you need to understand how these tools work, right? If you're coming out and you're saying, hey, I want to come work for your company, and I put you in front of alerts, and you say, well, I saw Cobalt Strike. I need you to understand what the risk is of seeing Cobalt Strike. I need you to understand what happens next. If Cobalt Strike lands on a host, what happens next and what should you look for? So make sure you understand, at least at a high level, how these operate. Again, it's all in the GitHub. You can go read all about those tools there. For most of us, we should research detections on how to stop these top 5 top tools. So there are a lot of blue team professionals and a lot of companies that are coming out with big blogs and recommendations on these are the best practices to stop these. Again, all in the GitHub. I've amassed them all for you. Mandiant has like a 60-page white paper on how to stop Mimikatz. It's incredible. Make sure you're looking at what is the recommended best practices for stopping these tools. And if you can't stop them, make sure you can at least detect them. That's always the minimum. Prevention's nice, detection is an absolute must because you don't know. If you get hit with ransomware and you don't know that it's happening, how are you supposed to call for help? So, lastly, make sure you're hardening your operating system images for all of your hosts. And a massive bonus here, lock down your Active Directory. Active Directory is the Achilles heel of most organizations. If you have accounts that are sitting there with passwords that are 3 years old and welcome 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, congratulations. A threat actor is about to have a field day with you. Again, lots of standards out there on how to lock down your operating system image. Make sure reading those. Microsoft puts out massive documentation on this. Okay, supply chain attacks. So I mentioned that for the folks in this room, what's important to understand is you may be the victim of a supply chain attack, you may be the target of a supply chain attack. And both matter, and we'll talk about how to control for both. So for victims, what this means is, let's just say CIS uses Tim's HVAC, for example, right? Target used an HVAC company as well, if you know that case study. And a threat actor wants to get into CIS. They say, I'm going to go after a weaker point in the chain, and I'm going to go after Tim's HVAC, because I know they've only got 5 employees and no, guaranteed security person working. And so they do that, and their ultimate goal is CIS. But the middleman ultimately does become a victim. The secondary part of this is you may be the target of a supply chain attack on the way to a real victim. If we have a small Western Kentucky company that does web development and web page design for Walmart, you are a prime target for a threat actor to get into Walmart. They know Walmart is very well secured. They have a full security staff. They're a Fortune 1, I think, right now. They've got tons of money. They're not going to go knocking on the front doors of the castle, right? They're going to look for the window where the moat has dried up to go break in. So make sure you're aware that you may not be the ultimate target, but you can be a target on the way. And those companies can hold you accountable for that. When we talk about folks who are the target for supply chain attacks, or organizations that are the supply chain targets for the supply chain attacks, usually what they're trying to get to are government organizations, critical infrastructure, so your ISPs, energy, water, or Fortune 500s. Really, this is Fortune 150s and above. It depends on kind of what your organization does, but they usually have the juicier data that these threat actors are going after. So make sure you understand who your customers are and who your vendors are. At least know what contracts are being signed, right? If you don't know what you have and where your money's flowing in and out of and who has RDP access to your systems, you don't know when someone gets breached that you should actually care about that. So make sure you're documenting that and you understand the risk that flows between these companies. Number 2, you want to document all your vendors and the software in your ecosystem. So it's not just that a threat actor can be like, hey, I'm going to go target Tim's HVAC company and I'm just going to go RDP right in and go breach them. It may also be something like Log4j, where someone decides, I'm just going to throw everything at the wall and see who I get. So they're going to start breaching software, right? We saw this with CCleaner many years ago. That's a really good use case to go take a look at. And SolarWinds, more recently, again, they were going after large Fortune 500 organizations and government contracts. So make sure you're documenting this. Again, you can't protect what you don't know about. Make an inventory. Number 3, employ least privilege. There is no reason why most of the people in this room should be domain administrator, ever. There's also no reason why Tim's HVAC company should be domain administrator. So let's go make sure that we've given them the least amount of rights possible to function and do their job, but we're not over-permissioning them and opening ourselves up to risk. Number 4, this is an interesting one. This isn't a technical solution. This is check for breach language in all of your contracts. And this will serve you as an organization, and this may be used against you in an organization. So make sure you understand this. Most times now, there is language in contracts that says, hey, if you are providing web development services to Walmart, you must have a minimum security practice in place. You gotta do a pen test annually. You need to have endpoint detection and response tool, and you need to show me that you've got someone monitoring your alerts, right? This is kind of the bare minimum. So when you ultimately, if you get hit and you have a contract with this particular vendor, they can say, well, if you didn't do this, we can sue you back, right? You had negligence. You caused this potential damage and harm. The additional point here is there may be stipulations that say if you are breached, you must let your vendor know within 72 hours. Again, or else they can hold you legally liable for any material damage that happens to their company. And the same, if you're talking with your vendors, make sure you have this breach language, contract language in place. Make sure that you've got something to protect yourself. If your vendors get hit, how can you hold them responsible? That's a very big question that a lot of companies are asking now. A bonus part on this breach language, a lot of that same breach language that's being used in contracts is also starting to come around cyber insurance. These are starting to be guidelines that you need in order to get cyber insurance. Ransomware has made it very, very expensive for cyber insurers, and they're saying you need to have a minimum level of security in place if you want our money, you want our protection. All right, so for 5, this is for students out here, right, and for security practitioners, research historic supply chains. This is big for you students. Read the use cases. The Okta breach that just happened by Lapsus Group. That was a supply chain attack. They went after a Latin American services provider. There's a great case study on that. Okta has an awesome piece on their blog, and I think I've got it up on the GitHub as well, that talks about what happened, how they investigated it, and you can see what went wrong, and you can see the lessons learned from this. SolarWinds is a massive one that will never let us have a peaceful Christmas again because we all have PTSD from that. Kaseya is another really, really big one. And then lastly, again, security practitioners, business owners, students, pay attention to your managed services provider and managed security services provider relationships. This is a big target for threat actors. Some of the vendors that I reviewed said that MSPs are the #1 target for supply chain attacks in 2021. This is because they hold all the keys to the kingdom. You have to give them more permissions in order to help you do your job and be successful at it. This is, if an attacker gets into an MSP, right, and this is what Kaseya kind of happened there, it could be potentially game over. For you students and security practitioners, if you work at one of these services providers, just be aware of individual targeting. Threat actors like to go after individuals as a way into the services provider. Just be aware about what you're putting out on the internet and make sure you are taking individual measures to secure yourself and your accounts. Okay, vulnerability exploitation. Yeah, so we all know this, right? A record for CVEs was set in 2021. We are seeing things being exploited all over the world every single day. If you have a vulnerability management program, you are probably bleeding from the eyes right now and crying because of how much you have to patch every patch Tuesday, right? It's becoming mountainous for us. So how do we make this work for us? So #1, make sure you're prioritizing your patches for external assets. Anything that's on the internet is going to get attacked first. This usually should be your highest severity, right? Your first priority. Don't always rely on CVSS score. CVSS score is nice. For a lot of us, it's a benchmarker. There should be other factors for your organization that help you consider which vulnerability to patch first. #2, patch the common stuff that is known to being exploited first. CISA has some great resources on this. They have a known exploited vulnerabilities catalog. This is 380 CVEs right now that CISA is seeing in the wild being exploited by threat actors. And they say, here you go, here's a database, go patch this stuff, right? If you're not doing that, they have a top 30 CVEs that were the most exploited over 2020 and 21. Go after that. Also, any CVE involving remote access applications, Exchange, SharePoint, or web applications, which is almost the majority of them, patch those first. That's the big thing. Remote access applications are the number one way threat actors are getting in now. #3, this gets into you can't protect what you don't know about. Build an inventory of your software and applications. Make sure you understand what's running on your systems. There could be a vulnerability that comes out for, I don't know, let's say Salesforce, right? And you're like, hey, we don't use Salesforce in our organization, we're fine, we don't have to worry about it. And then guess what? Somebody in some remote corner of your company decided to set up a Salesforce instance and they dropped it on the open internet and it's got admin as its passwords. So make sure you understand what's operating in your environment. All right, #4. Make sure you understand the most commonly exploited vulnerabilities. Students, for you, make sure you know what these are, what services they're talking. You don't have to understand them end to end. You don't even have to reproduce them end to end. Just make sure you can talk to what it is, what it targets, what happens when it is exploited. There's a big difference between an RCE and, I don't know, I'm blanking on any other options, but right, RCE or any other vulnerability that's out there right now. #5, understand the technical workings of one vulnerability from end to end. Students, this is important as you're coming out. Make sure you can talk to the technical details of what happens when a vulnerability is exploited. It will make you a better candidate. It will show me that you care. It'll show me that you understand what you're protecting and defending and have those critical thinking skills. #6, For organizations, prioritize a defense in-depth strategy as much as possible, right? For some of you who have 2 employees, sometimes Windows Defender is all you need, right? But you should have an email security appliance in place. You should have a firewall. You should have an endpoint detection and response bonus if it's got an antivirus attached to it. Have something that makes it difficult for the attacker to move further when they eventually exploit a vulnerability on your network. Because again, this is a game of multiples and statistics. Someone's going to exploit something eventually for you. It is your job to make sure they do not get to the domain controllers or get to your file shares or anything like that after they exploit it. Finally, shrink your attack surface as much as possible. Make it much harder for the threat actors to come after you. Don't put servers on the open internet if you don't have to. If you have to, don't have RDP open, right? Make sure you're putting as little as possible on the internet so that you are exposing nothing super critical to these threat actors. All right, I'm going to wake you up. So this talk feels like it's been an hour and 38 minutes already, right? Yes, excellent. No, this is actually the average time it takes for a e-crime actor to go from initial access to another host in an environment in 2021. So this is lateral movement, if you want to call it that. So an hour and 38 minutes. 62%, that's how finished we are with this presentation, right? Cool. No, this is the percentage of adversary attacks that were malware-less in 2021. This means they were using binaries from the Microsoft operating system to achieve their attacks. So there's not a lot for you to block with your traditional antivirus signatures when they are just using cmd.exe, right? E-crime actors are a big deal. They're after money, and that's it, right? And you can say like, hey, North Korea's after money too, and they're state-sponsored. Okay, but e-crime actors, right, are just like gangs of people who deploy ransomware or people who deploy Bitcoin miners, and they're like, all I care about is, can I make $50, $5,000, or $5 million? It doesn't matter. Any amount of dollars off of you, the e-crime actors win. They are smash and grab. It's if they're going, into your organization, they're going to hit hard, they're going to hit quick, they're going to get what they can and get out and see how much money they can make and do it time and time and time and time and time again. If you think about this as, let's say the average ransomware gang extorts 100 victims per year, they probably attempted to hit 400 victims in order to get successfully money from 100. So the more people you hit, the more potential payout you have. Even for small business, even small e-crime families, right? If they come after just businesses in Western Kentucky, let's say, and they hit 50 of our organizations, and they just say, hey, we want $5,000 from you, right? And let's say they've got a 50% success rate. If they hit 25 of y'all in, I don't know, a month, a year, whatever time period, and get $5,000 from each of you, that's not chump change, right? And for a lot of these folks, an hour and 38 minutes, right, this is potentially thousands of dollars per hour that they're gaining. All right, so how do we defend against this? It's a lot of the same stuff. Make sure you have strong standards for your credentials in place, long passwords, MFA where possible. Stop using welcome 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 as your password. Please, I am begging you. Stop using Spring 2022. Stop using things that are easy to guess. If you have to use those, don't do it on your enterprise account. Do that for your Gmail where things are isolated a little bit, right? You're not exposing a ton of money potentially. Also, don't reuse your Gmail account password with your organizational password. When I sign up for Netflix is a huge target. I know Netflix is probably going to get breached. They're going to see a lovely password of I love cats 420, right? Something like that. I am not using that in Marsh McLennan. That does not make sense. I'm isolating my breach potential here. Again, number 2, clean up your attack surface. Limit what is exposed to the internet and limit what has remote access capability from your environment. We're talking about RDP, we're talking about VPNs. We're also talking about virtualization management, so ESXi, Hyper-V, all of these management interfaces. Don't put them on the internet if you can help it. If you do, at least put MFA and a strong password on it. Leverage your proper phishing training. Phishing hasn't gone away. I know ransomware is like taking a central stage, but people are still emailing like, hey, I know what you did last summer. I have a video camera on you. Give me $200 in eBay gift cards or something like that, right? Like that's still very much a thing. So don't forget about doing phishing. It's a great initial access point for a lot of threat actors. They make good money on that. For security professionals and students, monitor the trends that are happening in the industry and threat actors. CrowdStrike, Mandiant, Red Canary, Sophos, BlackBerry, you name the vendor, everyone's putting out articles on what they're seeing and what's happening. Just read that. You don't even have to read them every day. Read one a week, read a couple a month. Make sure you know where people are going and what's happening. Number 5, practice detecting and protecting against common attacks. For those of you who don't have dedicated security organizations, this one's a little bit harder. I completely understand on that. Students, this is the perfect time. Like, you have endless time to practice attacking and defending. Please do this. If you do nothing else, do this. It will help you. It'll save you so much time getting up to speed when you get into industry. There are tons of practical labs out there for cybersecurity now that I wish I had back in my day. Try Hack Me, Hack the Box, all of that. I will even do one better challenge. If one of you wants to engage with me and show me that you're already actively doing this yourself, I'm happy to pay for a 1-year membership. So only if you're actually doing it. You have to show me proof. This is not, I'm not taking you at your word. Lastly, participate in your information sharing groups. And even better, establish a partnership with law enforcement. The FBI is doing incredible stuff with outreach. For you folks in Kentucky, that's going to be the Louisville field office. I've got a list for every state in the region on the GitHub. Reach out to them. They are doing everything they possibly can to combat cybercrime. They release an internet crime report every year with a breakdown of what crimes are happening and how much money it is costing the general public. So the FBI really wants to stop this as much as possible. Information sharing groups. ISACs are great. They can cost a lot of money. I love my ISAC. I'm in the FS ISAC. They are super helpful. There's tons of info groups. If you cannot afford that, the best thing I could recommend is start talking with other businesses in your area. Say, hey, once a month we're going to meet and talk about the security events that we saw or security incidents we saw. We do not get safer by staying silent. We do not stay safer by making our security incidents a secret. We have to talk. We have to go out and try to help each other, because otherwise the threat actors are going to get stronger, right? If we want to use an analogy that we've heard time and time again over the last 2.5 years, this is a really great way to vaccinate yourself against impending cyber threats. Get out in front of them before they hit you. All right, now for, again, the piece de resistance. There was an 82 to 92% increase in ransomware incidents in 2021. This one really depends on who you ask, right? CrowdStrike says 82. A couple other folks say 92. We're going to take that 82 because that's the safe bet, right? I don't want to cause any fear, uncertainty, or doubt with you all. But still, an 82% increase in anything year over year is insane. I wish my stock portfolio was doing that. I would love that right now. But let's talk about ransomware. All right, so here's some cool stuff that's going to make you be like, man, what am I doing with my life? Marsh McLennan, I love it here. I promise I'm not thinking about hopping. Conti Gang, the most prolific ransomware group of 2021, made $12 million in 1 year. If you were in the top 10 group that we see in figure 6 over here, you made an average of $4.4 million in 2021. Now for those slackers at the end, right, you see they only made $500,000 in 2021, right? That's nothing to laugh at, because a lot of those folks were just coming up or got busted by the FBI in the process of trying to get their gang off the ground. But serious numbers, right? This is more than a lot of companies will ever see in their lifetime. Let me go into, there were 2,865 victims across 58 ransomware gangs in 2021. There were victims in 141 countries. The average ransomware gang extorted over 100 victims. And we saw increased targeting of manufacturing, construction, wholesale, and retail, and then also healthcare. Ransomware gangs really took the gloves off. In the past, we saw ransomware gangs saying, we don't touch healthcare. That's a human right. And now people are like, no, I don't care if your MRI machine fails. I don't care if you stop breathing. I am ransoming that hospital. You can't stop me. So you see this group here, this figure, on the left-hand side. This is the number of victims that were posted to extortion sites by each gang. If you were extorted, that means they were successful. So just think how many more multiples of victims were hit, never extorted, don't know about it, maybe being used for a supply chain attack now as we speak, maybe just being monitored before they get ransomed this year. imagine it's probably at least 2x, 3x of organizations that were targeted in 2021. And then lastly, let's talk about money. That's what everyone in this room cares about, right? So the average ransom that was paid in 2021 was $541,000, $500,000 per ransom. Now, that's a crazy number. What's even crazier to think is that was 43% less than the initial ransom demand. The average ransom demand was like $2.2 million. I'm taking your silence as fear. So what are the reasons for the increase? Because this is insane, right? This is becoming untenable. I've never seen something like this before. Payments happening in multiple forms. It's not just that you're getting encrypted. Now they're saying, hey, you're encrypted, and then we also stole all your performance review data for the last 10 years, and we're gonna leak it to the public if you don't pay us. So double extortion. Triple extortion. Okay, so let's say you pay that. You're like, oh my God, I'm gonna pay to get my files back. I'm gonna pay so that you don't leak my performance review. Some organizations are coming and say, hey, we're gonna tell everyone that you paid us too. So you're admitting guilt. So now we got triple extortion. So we're like, this is happening because people are paying in some form or another. The other part of this is, even if you're not paying that initial ransom, you're still paying something, which means they're like, hey, yeah, this is working, right? You don't give a dog a treat every time he gets up on your couch if you don't want him on your couch, and that's what's happening right now. We're like, hey, get off the couch. Oh yeah, here you go. Here's a bowl of food. Have fun. We also see the hyper efficiency of ransomware gangs. We talked about common and open attack tools. They're all using the same tools. They are all cross-pollinating between gangs, and they are moving, and they're like, hey, you need an initial access guy, I got you, I can exploit RDP, let's go. Hey, you need to phish someone, awesome. They specialize in things. And then special shout out to my threat intelligence team at Marsh McLennan, who is able to give me this. This is, on your far left, an example of the corporate hierarchy of Conti ransomware gang. So they're operating like a business. They've got HR people, they've got finance people, they've got people who do initial access, they've got all across the board. They are an efficient, well-oiled machine. They got drama just like the rest of us do. Don't worry about that. We also see the compounding expansion of the attack surface. As folks started moving to work from home, as we start moving to the cloud, so much is happening so fast. It's like a bullet train of just like, hey, I'm gonna turn it all on, right? And this gives it's like the Wild West for attackers out there. They can walk in and be like, I'm gonna pop that box, good to go. I'm gonna go pop that box, awesome. I'm gonna go hit your cloud instance that you never configured properly because you're in a super rush and we're all working too many hours and things are difficult right now. And then lastly, we see continued shelter from supporting countries. This is where we start getting into the geopolitical stuff. Russia has no reason to tell the ransomware gangs to stop, right? Even if they tax them at a nominal percent, Conti gang brought in $12 million, right? If Russia says, give me, I don't know, 10% of that, that's $1.2 million. They get protection from the Russian government, they still get to operate, and Russia's got a new stream of revenue. It's a win-win for everybody except us, right? So there's no advantage for countries to step in and say, hey, you gotta stop ransoming, right? Again, there are folks who graduated from TSM who are working at higher powers, government side, advocacy side, that are really working to put a stop to this. And the industry and government are really working to say, hey, we gotta start like issuing arrest warrants. We gotta start calling these people out that are operating publicly, but it's gonna take time for that to catch up and start scaring people. It's only really started to make an impact to the threat landscape over the last 2 years or so. Woo, this is a lot of defenses. It's all on the GitHub, don't worry, folks. So if you could only do 10 things to defend against ransomware, here's what you should do, right? Number one, patch your known initial access CVEs or vulnerabilities. Palo Alto put out a list of 41 CVEs that they saw throughout all of their ransomware incidents in 2021. It'll be on the GitHub, I promise. I have it all listed out for you. You can copy and paste it. Number two, implement network segmentation. This is like the Titanic, folks, right? You want to implement flood doors. If they get into your DMZ, there is no reason why they should be able to access your production network or your management networks or your domain controllers. Stop them where you can. Put the flood guards in. Number three, implement your backups. If you are a small to medium-sized business, this is really the only one that matters for you, right? Do backups. Do them daily if you can do them. Put them on the cloud, put them on tape, get them in place. Backups are super, super important. It'll prevent you at least from having to pay that encryption ransom so you can get back into business a little bit. It might not help with the extortion. That's a risk call that you and your business needs to make. Bonus, do it with immutable storage so that if they do access your backup system, there's a higher likelihood that they won't be able to overwrite your backups, because ransomware gangs are doing that. They're targeting backup systems now to erase your backups to force you to pay. Number 4, block what you don't use, block what you don't need. Again, if you're Tim's HVAC company and you don't do any business with China, why are you doing network connections with China? Just cut it off. Number 5, lock down your Active Directory and GPO. Nothing is worse than having everyone be a domain administrator in your organization, having weak passwords, and then also making it very easy for attackers to walk into your GPO and deploy their ransomware organization-wide. And by the way, that is happening, right? They're starting to use your own IT systems against you. Make sure you are locking those down so attackers aren't coming after them. Clean up your attack surface. We've talked about this time and time again. I'm not going to beat this dead horse here. 7, do some form of credential management at a minimum. Don't reuse passwords. Do something to protect the usernames and passwords of your organization. Number 8, use multiple forms of security tools. Again, Microsoft Defender is a really good bet. This goes into the defense in depth strategy. Have something that stops every point of the attack, potentially. Number 9, enlist help. You're not in this alone, right? If you can't afford a dedicated security team, a services company may be best for you. Again, do your POCs, make sure you ask around who works. But services have become a lot more scalable and a lot more affordable for organizations now. Don't feel like you have to try to do this alone, or even worse, don't feel like you should just ignore it because you can't do it yourself. Also, make sure that you're participating in sharing communities like we just talked about, and use guidance provided by government organizations like CISA, consulting firms like Mandiant and CrowdStrike, who see these types of attacks time and time and time and time again. They get called in when things are the worst. They know what you should do to make sure that you're not the one having to call them next. And then number 10, I cannot stress this enough, don't pay the ransom. And this is easier said than done. I know some of you in the business are like, oh man, Lauren, you need to shut up, right? Like, I have no other option. I have to operate now. I have to pay the ransom and get going. If you have to pay the ransom, if none of this worked for you and you still got breached, right? At least get a negotiator so you are making it less profitable for them. Bring it down even lower than that 43%, right? Pay them a potato chip and $5 if that's what it takes. Because the lower we get this, the less times they're going to keep jumping on the couch because they're not getting as much food each time, right? We have to have a concerted effort from all of us to address this. All right, so none of that worked. You did everything I just said and some, and you've been encrypted. Oh my God, what next? Okay, don't panic, number 1. That's going to make things insurmountably worse. You're not alone, right? People are getting encrypted every single day. This is a thing. Ransoms are happening. Make sure you implement your incident response plan immediately. At the very least, if your incident response plan is, we got ransomed, we called the FBI, awesome. That's better than no incident response plan, right? They can help you navigate what's happening. Or if it's, hey, we're going to go call Mandiant or CrowdStrike. Number 2, isolate your infected assets and make sure they are not infecting the rest of your network. This is where network segmentation helps, but cut them off from everything else. You don't want this spreading like wildfire, because as soon as they get into one of the networks where they can go quick, they're going to go quick. They're going to start infecting and encrypting everything. Number 3, identify the attack infrastructure that was used and start trying to block it. This is easier said than done. That's why I say engage partnerships, but try to pinpoint what they're using to call out, to encrypt, see what hashes they're using. Do your best to start blocking that so that you can stop the bleeding a little bit. Number 4, start looking for what was taken out of your organization. It's no longer just encryption. They are stealing things from you. They are exfiltrating data. What did they take? What did they have access to? What was connected to those PCs that were encrypted? Number 5, Number 6, monitor for mentions of your company on social media. If you've got a dedicated security team, even better if you've got a dedicated threat intelligence team, I tell you to look on the extortion sites. These are pretty openly out there for threat intelligence professionals. For the rest of you, as soon as you land on an extortion site, someone's gonna get on Twitter and be like, hey, Tim's HVAC just got popped. They're on the Conti leak site. Good luck, right? So make sure you know where you're at in the breach process, if they're starting to advertise your data or not. Number 7, begin restoring from your backups in safe areas after you've isolated everything else, but only if you think the threat has been neutralized. The worst thing you can do is do none of the rest of this and be like, I'm gonna start restoring from backups immediately. And the threat actors are like, I'm back, ding, 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 game over. Number 8, engage a trusted negotiator if you need to avoid a leak. I wanna say right now, this is never a guarantee that they will not leak your files. There is no ethics for cyber criminals. You may pay them and they might still be like, you know what, this was juicy enough, I'm just gonna tell the whole world anyway. Just make sure if you wanna pay less, engage a negotiator here. Number 9, conduct a formal after-action review. Define what happened, and how you can prevent it from happening again the exact same way. The worst thing that can happen is a ransomware actor will come knocking on your door again 6 months later, and they take the exact same attack path, and they get you again for the same exact number of dollars. We do see a lot of ransomware gangs actually being like, hey, you should probably close RDP on this server. This is how we get in. So they're like, oh, we're going to provide some after-action incident response services. This is a thing ransomware gangs are doing. They're trying to be the benevolent Robin Hoods. Don't count on it. Conduct your own independent after-action review. And then number 10, tell your story to trusted partners. You don't need to get on the Murray News and be like, hey, we got ransomed, shocker, here's what we paid. But talk to your information sharing groups. Talk to law enforcement. Silence is deadly here. I know it's shameful, right? We don't want to say it. Everyone who works in an organization in the security industry has probably been breached at some point in their career. We've all worked these cases. We cannot talk about them unless we're in these trusted sharing groups, and we can't learn unless we talk about them. Be careful about what you share, right? Establish boundaries, but the more silent we stay, the more these attackers win. All right, I've significantly bored you to death with ransomware. We're going to talk about geopolitical threats, even more controversial. Geopolitical threats and you, or every action has an equal reaction. Listen, for most of the organizations in this region, and for most of the folks, students in this room, the organizations where you're going to work for, geopolitical threats should not be your top concern. Yes, they happen, right? If someone goes and bombs Russia, yes, that's going to have an impact on the cyber realm, right? But it's not going to be directly to you. It's going to be what everyone else is seeing. Don't listen to a lot of these, I'd say, vendors and industry experts who are like, hey, China is going to come in the middle of the night and enter your network and take everything. Because they're trying to scare you. They're trying to get you to buy your solution. And guess what? If you're Tim's HVAC, China doesn't give a shit about you. I'm sorry, it's true, right? So whether you like it or not, they do impact you, maybe not in the most direct manner, but here's the thing, your industry matters in this. You know what state-sponsored actors care about? They care about ISPs. They care about energy. They care about water. They care about telcos. They care about critical infrastructure. I did an internship for Murrell Electric. Murrell Electric, you are a prime target for a state-sponsored actor because you come off of a backbone of a larger grid, right? Water, right? If they can shut down water in Western Kentucky, oh my God, like that has major impact. That's the kind of stuff they're interested in. They don't care about your HVAC company, right? They don't care about your mom and pop restaurant. They don't really care, I shouldn't say Murray, because they do care about universities, right? I'm in Kansas City. If you go read the news, there was a Chinese spy at the University of Kansas that was indicted and arrested for conducting espionage for government research, right? Universities are a prime target for state-sponsored actors. R1, like research level 1 universities are normally the top pick. Sometimes they'll go after smaller universities to get a foot in and then pivot into those larger organizations or use those partnerships. So just be aware of what industry you're in, right? Don't listen to what everyone's screaming about, right? Right now it's the Russia-Ukraine cyber conflict where we've seen stuff, but it's really been in Ukraine, right? It's very, very targeted. It's not spilling out over here yet, unless you count the hacktivists, which I don't. Those are not state-sponsored. Make sure you are just looking at this from the perspective of what do I do, who do I have relationships, do I care about this Chinese spy that went to the University of Kansas here at Murray State? And the answer may be yes, but only you can answer that. Safe companies are going to continue shielding cyber threat actors. There's no reason for them to stop right now. No muscle is being used to really say, hey, China, you got to stop doing espionage, right? This has been part of their bread and butter over the last 30, 40 years. They've been building this program. Why would they stop now? They're so successful. So as we start building up, students, as you're looking at career paths, government is a great option. We've got a lot of alumni who are out there that you can talk to about how to make an impact from a government level. I'm going to tell you it doesn't pay a ton right now, right? But there's a war to be fought that is very, very helpful, and you can make a huge impact. Larger organizations, folks who are part of larger organizations here, help join the fight. Jacob, I know you're with Amazon, right? Amazon participates a lot. Walmart participates a lot. Every Fortune 500 out there who's got a major cyber program are trying to help combat this from a higher level. So this is out there. All this to say, most of the time, geopolitical shifts will not impact you directly. All right, like I said, I have everything on GitHub for you here. The tiny URL is msu-pod-homework, because you all have homework now, is to read all of this. Again, over 100 links. There is a section in here that says, if you can only do 10 things, do these, right? That's related to ransomware and the general threat landscape. It's got everything in here. Tons of stuff for you to read, tons of stuff for you to practice. I really, really hope it's helpful. Everyone get their photos? If you don't, I'll give it to you after. Don't worry, I promise. Before we jump into questions, I want to say special thanks to my team at Marsh McLennan. You make me better. I want to say special thanks to all the Murray State grads that I've hired, because you have made this wild, wild career a whole lot of fun. Shout out to all the professors at MSU. Shout out to all of the TSM program. And shout out to all of you for coming today. Really, really appreciate it, and you guys are working to get better. If we run out of time for questions, because I know I talked a lot, I'm checking my watch a lot here, you can find me at John Viller on Twitter, Lauren Prale on LinkedIn, or lauren@laurenprale.com. I am happy to have a conversation about anything ever. Students, reach out to your alumni, start using those connections. That's one of the things that made me as successful as I am today. And we can jump over to questions.
Anybody have any questions?
How do we, as business professionals, make companies like Tim's HVAC care about being ransomed before they're ransomed versus after they're ransomed, where there may not be backups or anything available?
Yeah, so that's a good question, especially for the SMBs, for the mom and pops, right? I always like to say, speak in terms of dollars, speak in terms of risk and loss. $12 million for a ransomware gang for 1 year is a pretty powerful statement. If you look at the FBI IC3 report for last year, I think the number lost to ransomware was in like 37 million or something like that. But the other part of it is have conversations, right? I'll take my dad's company as an example. My dad's great. My dad's a CFO. He works for a small trucking company. They do not have dedicated security staff. Why would they? Why should they care? They sell semi-trucks, right? And I start having conversations with my dad. I'm like, hey, here's what I'm learning in school. Here's what I'm seeing that I can talk about in industry, right? And I'm just dropping tidbits, right? It's when we're playing cards, when we're eating dinner, when we're having a drink, right? Tidbits of what you should do. And what do you know? He listened to me. He did backups, and they got ransomed. And they restored from backups. They didn't have to pay a cent, right? But you do it when you're fishing with your buddies, right? This has to be, hey, I care about you. Here's what's happening at work. It's almost a little bit subversive, but you don't want to come off preachy, right? And you don't want to come off like a lot of the vendors are coming off, which is Chinese spies are in your network now by CrowdStrike, Mandiant, Microsoft, McAfee, right? So that's what I would recommend.
All right, one more. Well, Lauren will, you got just in time. There's a question on the discussion, and I will post the link if you're okay with it.
Yeah, that's fine.
To your GitHub
Yeah.
on the YouTube comment section.
You said the ransomware software is open source. Do you find that these software have to be modified heavily or are just ready to use?
So are you asking if the ransomware code is open source? Sorry, I couldn't hear you quite well.
I'm asking, does it have to be like heavily modified to be used, or is it ready to be used?
Okay, yeah, so there's two different things. So actually, ransomware source code is being open sourced by affiliates and ransomware gang operators who are upset, and it's ready to rip, right? If you look at the Conti leaks right now, there is source code for Conti's ransomware payload that you could go download from the leak site. Do not do that. I'm saying in theory you could, don't do that. You could go download right now and run it. It'll be detected by everyone because every vendor out in the game has gone and grabbed the source code to detect it. The other stuff are common attack tools. That stuff is on GitHub and ready to run right now. There's nothing custom about it. Again, if you're a student, go get a lab. Make sure you clear this with your professors. Make sure you have protections in place. Go download Mimikatz from GitHub. Run it on a Windows 7 image. I mean, that's exactly what the threat actors do. In fact, most threat actors are going and downloading these tools from GitHub on your network. After they enter, they're like, hey, I'm gonna rub it in your face even more. I'm gonna go grab this GitHub repo, put it on your PC, and I'm gonna run it. I'm not even gonna bring it with me. And then they leave. Block GitHub. That is the correct answer. Block GitHub, email, and the internet, and you're fine.
All right. Well, with that, thank you, Lauren, very much. There were a lot of people watching the online stream. Maybe somebody just.
You want to take this? It's the Chinese spies.
What's that? There it goes. Now it's back. But thank you very much. There were a lot of people watching the online stream, and I'm going to assume they weren't all your colleagues. But there are definitely a lot of folks watching. So, but thank you very much. Before we have a break, and I will say to everybody that's here, not only are we streaming it, but since we're streaming it, it'll be on our YouTube and Facebook, YouTube channel and Facebook page, so you can go back and watch if you want to hear part of any of our presenters today again. All right, T-shirts. 107 and 183. 107, 183. Do I hear 107? How about 162? All right, we'll take care of those right after the break. Actually, let me put those back in here. Are you 107 that just walked in? Oh. And then 87. How about 87? Earbuds. 87. All right. All right. Well, I'll bring your earbuds back to you. We're on a break for about 15 minutes. Meet back in here. We'll round you up. There are still some coffee, water out there, some Danishes. Have at it. Be back in here in about 10 or 15 minutes. Y'all can come up here and get your shirt if you want it. security. We were already doing it here. So security's been part of what we have done both in person and online for a long, long time. In 2013, the Industrial and Engineering Technology program in the engineering physics building, or engineering physics programs, combined under one umbrella. A few years later, we changed that to the Institute of Engineering. A couple years ago, we changed that again to the School of Engineering. In 2019, our TSM program, actually, it's funny, and if you're an alum, you've known this for a long time. If you're on our advisory board, you've known this for a long time. We knew a long time ago that TSM was not the right name for our program. It did not represent what we did as a program. It did, but it didn't encompass everything. So for a long time, we've had this debate, fight, argument, squabble, whatever you want to call it, on what should that name be. And finally, in 2019, it changed to Cybersecurity and Network Management. So our bachelor's program, what has been TSM for a long time, is now called Cybersecurity and Network Management. It's the same program, the same emphasis. Sure, we have more security now than when we did, say, 10 years ago, but you need more security now than you did 10 years ago, need more now than you did 20 years ago. In 2019 as well, we actually, what a lot of people don't know is that we had a master's in telecommunication systems management. Academic term-wise, we actually shut down that master's program and created a new one in cybersecurity management. Now, for most people, they see that one transitioned into the other, which it did, but technically we shut it down and created a new one. And I say we, Dr. Combs, who's sitting in the back, did the bulk, and when I say bulk, like 99.99% of the work to make that happen. And now we have a strong cybersecurity master's program as well. And then we transitioned the center for TSM. Actually, it transitioned a couple times, but it is now the Cyber Education and Research Center. This slide has a lot of things on it that I'm not going to necessarily touch on, but here's kind of the way that things stand now. And this slide looks very similar to that slide I showed you circa 1999, because it is very similar. The center is still that outreach research component. We're still going to host events like this. We're still doing these things. There's still a bachelor's program in what's now the School of Engineering. There's still a master's program in the Computer Science and Information Systems department. It still looks like it did in 1999 with one major difference, and it's cybersecurity. We are wanting to emphasize cybersecurity even more than we have ever done that in the past. And as evidence of our speakers today and the rest of our speakers and most speakers that we have at Security Matters who are our alums working in security, it's been an emphasis for a long time. But we really want to make sure that we do that going forward. So what I'll wrap up with is, what does all this mean? It means that we are more cyber focused than we've ever been. It means that our bachelor's program is cybersecurity network management, cyber security focused. Our master, cybersecurity management, cybersecurity focused. Our center, with its new name and new vision and new direction, is cybersecurity focused. So I think that's important for you all to know that. So Security Matters especially is something that's going to be important to us even more so going forward, because we do want to make sure that we're doing that research that is important in cybersecurity, that we're preparing our students for those cybersecurity and networking jobs in the future. We want to make sure that we're creating those managers of networking in addition to security. It's not only, we still have an option in areas of emphasis in security. We still have it in system and network administration. We still have it in wireless communications. All those areas of emphasis are still there, but we also know that moving forward, that us being a cybersecurity is, well, let me say this a different way. We believe cybersecurity is where we're going to be able to hang our hat going forward. And that's what the center's name is, and that's what we will focus on going forward. And I'll just give you one example. We have a current forensics project that we've been working on. And these are just a few artifacts that have popped up. So if you all don't know how to purchase things on eBay, where is he? There he is. Randall can find anything, Dr. Randall Joyce can find anything on eBay, and he can find it at a cheaper price than you can. I don't know how he has this skill, but we've purchased several mobile phones on eBay. Used phones, intentionally used phones that people were selling for cheap on eBay, and are forensically investigating them. And the purpose of it is to provide some awareness at how poor of a job people do at sanitizing their phone when they get rid of it. And let me tell you, people do a very, very poor job of sanitizing their phone when they get rid of it. First, I'll tell you, and I'm running over my time. Randall's right. I can't say anything in 5 minutes. Destroy it. Beat it with a hammer. Break it into 100 parts. Don't sell it on eBay. It is amazing the amount of information we have found. So security cards, we have found driver's license, we have found text messages that you probably don't want others reading. There was a law clerk from a law firm that has all of their law firm's documents. I won't say all because I don't know how many they have, but a ton of law firm confidential files on their device. As a business owner, you should think about what information is on your employees' personal devices and how do they dispose of it, because a lot of information is available. And obviously we won't share that information, but we do want to share awareness of software that you can buy off the street, that I can buy off the street, and phones that anybody can get on eBay, and what is out there. So anyway, we'll be doing a lot of research in cybersecurity over the coming months and years, decades to come. But I just wanted to share that as an example of something that we're working on right now. And I say we're working on it. It's really Dr. Combs, Dr. Joyce, and Dr. Ferris. I don't know where Ferris, there he is. The three of them are working on it. I am just in the room a lot when they have discussions, doing a few other things. But it's really some cool stuff that that is working on, and some potentials of things that we can work on in the future. So with that, I want to bring up Colleen Turner, who will present our next two awards.
Hello, my name is Colleen Turner. I'm a junior cybersecurity network management major from Owensboro, Kentucky, and I'll be graduating next May 2023. I'll be presenting the John Williams Entrepreneurship Award and the Lana Garner Porter Women in Technology Award. First is the John Williams Entrepreneurship Award, and this award is presented to an individual or company that has started a cyber-related company or significantly expanded an operation in Kentucky or the Murray State Service area. This year's winner of the John Williams Entrepreneurship Award is Scott Waldrop. Mr. Waldrop is the president of United Systems in Benton, Kentucky. United Systems began in 1977, merged with Computer Services in 1984, and has continued growing ever since. In 2018, United Systems announced they would be building a new $5.3 million headquarters and adding 50 new jobs. This new facility has been completed, and United Systems held its grand opening in August. It is a phenomenal facility located on Highway 641. You will see it between here and I-69. I would encourage you to stop by for a tour. Congratulations, Mr. Scott Waltrip. Please come forward and receive your award. Second is the Lana Garner Porter Women in Technology Award. This award is presented to a woman who has made a significant contribution in the industry or cyber through her leadership, technical and or management skills. This year's winner of the Lana Garner Porter Women in Technology Award is Miss Kim Skipworth. Ms. Skipworth is the Director of Software Development at Computer Services Incorporated in Paducah. She has worked at CSI for more than 22 years, beginning as a programmer analyst in 2000 and advancing up through the ranks to her current role. Anyone who has worked with Ms. Skipworth will note her leadership skills as a manager and in the industry. Ms. Skipworth serves on the Department of Computer and Information Systems Advisory Committee, where she received a bachelor's degree in computer information systems. As evidence of the leadership that she provides to both CSI and our region, she was the catalyst to creating a regional organization for women working in STEM, a group focused on building up and helping women network with other women in an underrepresented field. Congratulations, Ms. Kim Skipworth. Please come forward and receive your award. Our next speaker is Jacob Abbott. Jacob is the Worldwide Partner Practice Lead for Security at Amazon Web Services. Jacob's topic is Securing the Cloud, Recommendations for Well-Architectured and Secure Cloud Applications. Jacob is a 2005 graduate of Murray State University's TSM program, and since graduation, Jacob has held jobs including roles at Fidelity Investments, Yum Brands, Moho Networks, Arista Networks, and Comcast Business before landing at Amazon Web Services. Throughout his career, Jacob's path has taken him from the technical side of networking, security, and wireless to sales and strategic planning. From the customer side of the house to the vendor side, his depth and breadth of experience make him perfect for his new role. Please welcome Jacob Abbott.
Thanks, Drew, for showing up at the right time. All right. Well, it's great to be here. Good to see you guys again. How many classes was I in this week? 3? And you guys were all on 3 of them. And thanks, Lauren. You covered pretty much everything I was going to cover this afternoon. So we'll make this quick since I'm between you and lunch, which is, I always love being that speaker. So again, my name is Jacob Abbott. I'm the Global Security Business Lead for AWS's Partner Network. If you don't know what that is, stand in line. I'm not sure exactly how to explain it to my parents either. It's an interesting role. So let me try to explain it as much as I can. So I am the liaison between our product teams within AWS's product teams, like the support guard duty, Security Hub, Inspector, Detective, all of our services that we have in the cloud. And I'm the interface between them and our partners out there. So I support 120,000 partners globally, and then they have individual partner managers that manage that partner. So I'm there to build go-to-market strategies, how do we package solutions, build sales plays, how do we partner ISV solution, which is like a CrowdStrike or a Tanium, or he's not here anymore. I think that's where he got a job at. Basically building software applications and marrying them up to consulting partners such as, our GSIs out there like Accenture, PwC, Deloitte. I also work with some smaller ones that are more focused on MSSPs, which is like an Arctic Wolf or more of a software-based solution like Deepwatch. So I work with a lot of partners all over the globe. travel a lot. I get to see a lot of cool things. But as the name implies, I'm business focused. So if you have technical questions, ask Lauren or Drew or Wes or all the other smart people in this room, because they'll be able to dive a little bit deeper than I can. So with that being said, I talked to some students this week, and it was awesome. I love talking to you guys, right? I like to try to bring another opportunity to focus on post-college, right? Some other opportunities that you can find. So I have animations on my slide, but since it's way over here, I'm just going to go through them all real quick, and then we'll move on. I've been a few places. It's funny, Lauren, I didn't know you worked at, where'd she go? She disappeared. I didn't know she was in Murray Electric as well. That's where I did my internship here at Murray when I was in college. And then I couldn't find a job, so that's the wiggle there. I was like, hey, where do I want to go work, right? I couldn't figure that out. So I moved to Boston, and I ended up getting a job at Best Buy. I was a double agent, which meant I was driving the bugs around to people's houses fixing their Wi-Fi, right? It was not the career I imagined coming out of college. And then I got an opportunity. I was associate network engineer at Fidelity Investments. I supported the financial networks and the trading platforms. Really cool opportunity. I got homesick, I'm going to move to this fast. So moved down to Insight, which was the largest cable provider in the state of Kentucky up in Louisville. I worked there for a little while as a TAC engineer, so I was supporting and doing operations, third shift, second shift. Then I went to Yum, then I ended up leading the network and telecom team for Yum. So again, this is customer side, more technical focused, right? Building out our network across all of our 32,000 restaurants in the US. It was a really cool job, right? I was able to work with a lot of vendors, right? I was starting to get more exposure to the outside world of just being a network engineer. And that's where I got recruited to Mojo Networks. And Mojo, if you remember last time I was here, which was I think 2013, I don't know where Michael is, but I think it was like 2013 that I was here. And if you've connected your phones to Wi-Fi while you were here, I did some fun hacks with you guys. I think Drew and Wes, you guys did some stuff for me there too. And that was fun, right? I was able to go into these companies and sell secure Wi-Fi, and I was more of a sales engineer and technical resource. And then we got acquired by Arista Networks, which is a larger network company, and we were their first acquisition. And then one of the companies I sold to was Comcast Business, right? So I went to Comcast Business as a sales guy. I was like, hey, I've done all the technical side, I need to learn the business side. I didn't really understand all of it, and I wanted to understand how a sales guy thinks, right? And being a vendor was really cool, right? So I was basically in charge of our financial vertical, but our food and beverage vertical. So I was selling to the Yums of the world, the RBIs, which is the Burger Kings, the Popeyes, those folks. So these large multinational QSRs. And then one of my customers, and you'll see a pattern here, is that once you get later in your career, especially if you're students, you're going to start meeting a lot of people, and those people are going to bring you with you. And one of my customers, when I was at Mojo, ended up going to AWS, and they recruited me to come over here for this role. So it's been a kind of a journey. I haven't figured out what I wanted to do yet, and I'm not going to recruit everybody here because everybody get mad at me if I recruit everybody here, but we'll be looking for some people next year. So that's my career, and if you students have any questions about that after class, I'm happy to talk about it a little bit more. Okay, so I'm just curious, how many people use the cloud for something in here? How many people are anti-cloud? One anti-clouder. Do you watch Netflix? Do you watch Disney? No. I'm not going to speak really on behalf of AWS, right, in the context of moving from traditional and doing migrations to the cloud. I'm just really here to kind of explain what the differences are, right? How can we help secure the cloud? And Lauren did a great job earlier in her presentation. So this is what a standard, data center on-premise traditional cloud or network would look like. It's you're basically in charge of it all, right? You're in charge of the infrastructure, how you're going to do your disaster recovery, your BR, how the software is going to be out there. You're responsible for patching the OSs, right? You're responsible for patching hypervisors. You're responsible for all of it, right? And that's different than how our cloud works. And this is no different from AWS to the other cloud providers that we have. So that's where the shared responsibility model comes in. Have you all heard of the shared responsibility model? I'm just trying to gauge audiences. I see a couple head nods. I need hands, people. Shared responsibility model? Okay, about 10%. Cool. So what the shared responsibility model is it's basically saying, hey, in this case, AWS is responsible for the cloud, right? What responsibility of the cloud, right? Responsibility of in the cloud means you're responsible for whatever's in that as the customer. You're responsible for security, you're responsible for patching, right? You're responsible for the applications that run on top of that. But what you're not responsible for is how the availability zones work, how regions work, right? How the compute works, right? You're not responsible for that underlying infrastructure, right? It's infrastructure as a service in another term. So you're able to go really quickly and deploy an application. We have, I think, over 220 different services within AWS right now. The other day I was in one of our test accounts and I wanted to build a web application just to play around with stuff and get some screen grabs for a presentation that I was going to do. And I used one of our app creation tools, and it ended up spinning up every single service I needed. And I could start building an application within just a couple minutes, right? I basically picked how big I wanted to go, what regions I wanted to be deployed in, right? And how I wanted it to go. So it was a really cool experience, right? For being able to do from a startup, right? If you want to do something new, you can go in here and do it really, really quickly. I'm sorry, I'm used to moving, so if I'm like all weird, I apologize. But the line varies, right? So this is the standard infrastructure as a service that I just talked about, right? So if you want to go in and have full control and be able to do pretty much everything that you want to do, right? This is kind of the starting point. But things evolved over the years, right? We started adding new services like containers or in Kubernetes. I'm just gonna, sorry. Like containers or RDS, right? And more of these services where it's more of a service and not the full infrastructure, right? So if you look at like the container services here, AWS is responsible for the platform, the application management, right? We're going to patch that OS and the underlying hypervisor or whatever is running there. You just have to deal with your single instance, right? Typically, this is like an AWS Lambda function where it's a serverless, right? You spin it up and it spins down within a few milliseconds if it needs to be. And then the last one is more of the abstracted services. This is like our S3 buckets, which is a storage, right? A global storage bucket or a simple storage service. Where again, AWS was going to take more responsibility of that particular application. All you have to worry about is the overarching security of that application. So it's a pretty cool way, right? And I think that if you're on the left-hand side of this, right, you're responsible for more of what's in the cloud. As you go right, it's a little bit more free. So it's a cool way of being able to go out there and do things really simply, right? So again, these are just some example services at the top. We have, I think, 230 or 240 services at this point. So one of the main doctrines, I guess, or frameworks that we have at AWS is the AWS well-architected framework. There's a lot of pages and a lot of documents that you can read about this, especially for all the pillars. There's 6 of them. The Operation Excellence pillar is basically saying, hey, here's a good way of building a cloud architecture that is simple, scalable, and you can operate it efficiently, right? Security, we're going to talk really in depth on that one today. Reliability, we heard about the example this morning with the tornadoes, right? It's how do you build out your cloud architecture so it's resilient and you have disaster recovery, right? And it can scale, right? We have a lot of availability zones out there that we can move data around all over the world. Performance efficiency, how do we architect your applications to run smoothly, fast, and efficient? We want to not have to have like some stuff over here, some stuff over there. We want to make sure that you're able to create something that's easy and scalable. Cost optimization is what it sounds like. We want it to make it as cheap as possible. We don't want to have you deploy multiple of the same services if you don't need it. And then the last one, sustainability, right? How are we lowering our global carbon footprint and being able to do this in a earth-friendly way. So we're going to dive into security a little bit. And I don't know if you saw a pattern from Lauren's conversation, but I'm pretty sure that all of these were somewhat abstracted from this framework. And we're going to go through each one of these individually. But implementing a strong identity foundation, enable traceability, security at all layers, automate security best practices, protect data in rest and at transit, and keep people away from your data and prepare for security events. And again, I'm pretty sure that's exactly what Lauren talked about earlier. So implementing a strong security strong identity is probably the most important, right? Since it's there, I think, again, Lauren, I'm going to keep calling her out, provided some really good examples of this, right? Provide the, I'm lost for words today. Provide, the best security that you can for identity. Here are just some of the services that we utilize in there for federations such as Cognito and directory services if you have that. Security of least privilege is what I was going for there, and somehow blank, sorry. So what does this look like? Right, this is what we call an anti-pattern. Basically, it's looking at your cloud infrastructure and your accounts and your VPCs that you have out there, and it's just a big old mess, right? You have basically somebody that set up an account with multiple VPCs, right, which a VPC is a virtual private cloud, right? So it's basically like if you were to take your data center and plop it in a section, it's a logical boundary between that infrastructure. Now, as you can see, this is a bunch of services out there. You have a bunch of access, a bunch of people out there that can access everything, right? It's not really designed in the best way. So what we look for, right, in the well-architectured diagram or well-architectured framework is basically building accounts for all of your different components out there, right? Segmentation of the users is very important. So if they don't need access, they don't need access, so let's keep them separate. And if you have any communication in between that, right, you can manage that through APIs or other things, right, to lower. So traceability, right? You can't protect what you can't see, right? So we want to make sure that we're able to see everything. Look at logs, config, trail, right? Or cloud trail, config, inspector, guard duty. These are all services that we offer inside of the cloud. Some of them are free. Some of them do have a charge to them, but they're able to go in there and pull all of this log. And a lot of times, these are the services that I focus on with our ISV. So we might provide the logs and the data in a raw form, and then those can be absorbed by other ISV tools out there. I'm sorry, I say ISVs thinking everybody knows what that means, but that's independent software vendors. So that's our third-party software that's out there that can do that, and that's like what did Lauren say earlier? CrowdStrike would be like one of those. Need a clicker. So. Infrastructure protection, so this is the best practices for securing at all layers of your network. So as you come in on the internet right into the AWS account, right, Route 53 is a creative name, obviously, for DNS. CloudFront is a cache engine, and WAF is your application firewall. So making sure that you're basically providing protection at every single piece of that VPC. So you have the public side, the ingress only, the NAT, and internal private. And just breaking that down, right, if you're basically decreasing your attack surface, right, the more services you provide at those additional layers. And again, right, I think Lauren said this as well, right? We want to automate as much as we can. Going in and doing manual audits, right? It's not really scalable. It's typically retroactive, right? You're not really knowing what you're doing. You're just kind of pulling data and you're trying to scrape it together. So we want to try and make that more automatic. So there's a lot of steps to do that, but we have a lot of tools that go through that as well. Cloud Watch Logs is one of those that we typically see a lot of, and config rules that will pull that in and audit it, right? And again, I'm not going too deep in all of these, right? But this is just the pillars of that AWS well-architectured framework. So protecting data at rest and in transit, that basically means encrypted everywhere, right? We want to encrypt when it's sitting on storage somewhere, and we want to encrypt it when it's transiting between different systems, right? There's a lot of API calls that happen within a cloud architecture, right? You're pulling information from here and moving it there, right? And we want to make sure that we're encrypting it what's in transit, because if you're not encrypting in transit, right, what's the point of encrypting it at all, right? Because it's going to be crossing lines somewhere, and you want to make sure that you encrypt it. And again, these are just some services that we utilize there for Encryption, KMS is probably the most common. Secrets manager is not really encryption, it's more of a way of storing secrets between your API calls so that you're not going in and manually putting in your secrets as those API calls are being pulled. I think this one's pretty obvious, again, right? Keeping people away from your data. So if you have data that needs to get pulled, figure out a way to get it to them without actually going to the root source and pulling it, right? So in this instance, right, this is just a simple diagram of using a Lambda function, which again is that serverless function that can be spun up and spun down within seconds. It will pull that data and, via API calls, and it will create a PDF in this case, and you can send it to your event log. So there's a lot of people that use Lambda functions all across their cloud to do very remedial tasks really quickly and really fast without having to maintain a server the entire time. So it's a really cool tool that has a lot of applications that can be utilized. And then again, prepare for security events, right? It's, again, Lauren talked about this earlier. There's a lot of times that things are going to happen. It's inevitable, right? Something is going to happen to your data as secure as you can be. So we have some tools that can help provide the analysis of that, right? Figuring out how do we recover from that with our, Cloud Endure not up here, but that's more of our backup solution. Disaster, actually it is up there, sorry. A detective will go in there and look, and then again, Lambda is kind of one of those things that gets spread out across all of our services over, depending on what your application is. So, yeah, I know I flew through that. I'm hungry. And my back is hurting, getting old as crap. But I'm open to questions about anything. I'm not the technical expert in AWS Cloud. I am more of a go-to-market type person, right? So if you have something that you're trying to bring to the business and spread across the world, right, that's where I typically come in. And that's kind of what I talked to the students this past week, right? There's two avenues that you can go about as a student, right? You can go the technical or business, or you can be like me and ping pong around and figure out what you want to do. I know Wes is going to talk a lot about, I think, that this afternoon during lunch. Lucky. Yeah, oh no, not Drew.
So Jacob, in the traditional data center web service application model, we've got application servers, we've got production servers, there's a DMZ for the web front end, and oftentimes we'll have a segregated environment with ACLs or next generation firewalls that say this comes in, it can't go out, and if this is good, this is bad, whatever. And then when we migrate those things, I know with my company, when we took a lot of that old school data center stuff and moved it up into AWS, everybody went, great, it's a big bucket, and we just kind of shoved everything up there. And we lost a lot of that DMZ capability and a lot of that segregation. And early on, we were looking at kind of the rows of are they rows of principles of least privilege, or are they firewall connections that are isolating that? How can AWS help me take we just literally took all our stuff in a cardboard box and threw it up in the cloud and make it a little more separated so we can run into that? Is that what we were looking at with the cloud platform?
Yeah. So for the people that were streaming, basically Drew was asking.
They heard me.
Good point. Yeah, so it's interesting, right? When you're going from a traditional straight to the cloud, a lot of what we're seeing a lot of what we have seen in the industry is kind of that, right? You take what's in the data center, you basically take exactly as it is and copy it to the cloud. It doesn't work, right? It's not built the same. And when you do that, a lot of folks aren't really talking about security in that. They're usually talking about it over here, let's implement security after we did it, right? So trying to move security to the left, right? Building secure landing pads. So I don't typically talk to customers directly. I talk to partners, right? And they have solutions that do this. But what we see is that a lot of people out there are building basically secure landing pads, right? They're basically building out the architecture before they do anything and move it over, right? And they segment that based on accounts, right? So you basically could have an account for your DevOps folks. You could have an account for production, account for your DMZ. So you're basically segmenting those into buckets. Now you can still manage all of that from the higher level with AWS organizations, right? It's not like you have to go deal with each account. But that builds it on the least privilege for that bucket, right, or that group of services. So that's what we see. We see a lot of people building these secure landing pads, and then they start moving applications kind of one by one, or two or three at a time, based on the well-architected principles, not just for security, but for resiliency, right, and for operational excellence, because it helps with managing it in the long term. Because as you saw on that one slide, right, it was all basically a bunch of VPCs in one account that had a bunch of accounts of people, and an IAM sitting in there somewhere that was an IAM's identity and access management. And these people had access to this, but then something moves and you're not able to really control. So being able to bucket those together as much as possible is usually the best strategy when it comes to migration, right? Migrations are typically long, right? Because you're changing the way your architecture works. It's not as simple as, right, a server and you have your backend database. Now you have like 10 different database choices, right, on the kind of data that you have. You have different compute options. You have serverless and, standard EC2, which is elastic compute, right? It's our standard compute stuff. There's, Kubernetes, right? There's so many choices when it comes to compute, and that application that you're doing it's important to manage that, right? And this is not just AWS, right? Every cloud provider has some kind of solution that has different compute options, different database options, different security options. So it's important to build that application based upon what you're doing. Long-winded answer for you, Drew. I knew you'd like that. Yeah, go ahead.
As far as the account strategy, you showed that slide about secure identity. Do you have any advice or best practices for small companies? Where do you find the balance between creating a organization structure within this organization, or creating multiple accounts per workload versus team size? Where is that sweet spot of knowing I've got a DevOps person and I need to create 10 accounts? That's overwhelming when you get them. So any advice on best practices there?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I still think that regardless of your size, whether you're an SMB or a large company, it's nice to be able to do that segmentation. Again, it goes to that least privilege, right, principle. So if you have 10 people, but you have a couple of people that are accounting, and a couple of people that are DevOps, maybe a couple of people are sales, right, a couple of people are engineering, you can still do that, right, and build multiple accounts. I can understand where if you have 100 accounts, it gets a little messy, but even then, right, that all rolls up into AWS organizations, right, which is basically managing those accounts for you. And you can do more things at a global scale. It just helps you build that identity policy for that specific person. And that way, if you grow, you don't have to redo it, right? Because that slide I was showing you is somebody that was small and they started growing, and and things can go fast, right? You don't have to add more EC2; it just automatically adds, right? If you're growing, but you want the policies that are attached to that original one to stay, but you don't want it to. If you add 10 new people, have to flip everything around a lot, right? The whole point of the cloud too is to make things simple and automate it as much as possible. Any other questions? Michael's not here to be the.
I have one. For an organization that's smaller, it's, that's where stuff is going eventually, is cloud and on-prem, that whole judgment call. What do you recommend? To me, AWS initially for a student or for somebody out in the field is just completely overwhelming. Just all the services. It's amazing what it can do, but where do you start?
Yeah, that's a good question. I started in October, right? And I went and took my cloud foundations, and I didn't realize there was over like 250 services that we offer. So I can understand there's going to be a little bit overwhelming. The nice thing is that things are starting to get built out, right? You're starting to see, on GitHub, there's all kinds of opportunities to build infrastructure as a service, right? You can go in and find people that have already built these secure architectures and frameworks, even for SMBs, that you can just go, hey, I'm going to copy this infrastructure code. It'll build your EC2s. It'll build your S3 buckets, right? Whatever the architecture you need. I would say that if you have somebody, there's probably an AWS rep that's local, right? That is always willing to help out. Obviously, I support the partners, right? So there's, like I said, 120,000 of them globally that support consulting services. Getting some sweet music in the background here. that will help you with that, right? That's their whole job. We have a whole SMB division. We have a whole startup division that is good at taking, smaller workloads, right, and transitioning those to the cloud. And some people do hybrids, right? We still see a lot of multi-hybrid cloud approaches to things that, maybe it's you still have some on-prem and some in cloud. So
if you're going to go then full threat, and I'm sorry, I just talked over somebody else, but
it was Wes. You talked over Wes, just so you know.
if you're going to go for those SMB markets, right? If you're going to go cloud, quote unquote cloud, but you don't necessarily have the need for full infrastructure as a service, should you look more into software as a service rather than going, full dev in AWS or Azure or Google Cloud?
Yeah, I mean, if there's a service out there that's already built, do it, right? Some of these software partners out there can do. I have 120,000 of them, and I keep saying that because there is literally a segment of software out there that will do literally everything, right? If you're interested in gaming, right, there's people that do that, right? If you're looking at doing banking, there's people that do that, and they can help build that out. Or call Drew. Oh. Well, you're like 3 minutes, 10 minutes. Bottom question. Any recommendations on where to start with training on the proper methodologies of how to migrate from traditional to cloud-hosted processes and services securely? Good question. I'm not going to, I've never been a big cert guy, like going out there and get your certifications. Honestly, the AWS well-architected framework, there's white papers on every single one of those pillars that talk about what are the basic building blocks for building a secure cloud infrastructure. Talking about how to build it operationally, efficiently, how to build it that it's going to be priced out right so you're not buying redundant services. I think that's a good spot. It's not too long. I think the security pillar itself is only 45 pages, so it can be a deep read, but it's very interesting to look at. Cloud Foundations is a good start as well for AWS, right? It's going to talk about the basic level of services, right? What's the difference between a Lambda function and a EC2 function? And I'm spitting all these services out there. Or you can just log in. The marketplace within AWS, right, basically says, hey, I want to launch a new web app that is connected to Facebook for authentication or to Google's authentication or what have you. You can go in there and do a wizard, and it's going to build out infrastructure for you, and you can kind of play with it. A lot of the services priced within AWS are free until you hit a certain threshold. So there's a lot of room to play without getting a huge bill. Just make sure when you do that you put some thresholds on your account so that if you do get breached or something crazy happens, and even if it's just a sandbox, you don't want get a surprise bill, right? That typically happens.
Yeah, I was going to mention the free tier. It's really, really good to kind of dip your toe into AWS. You can check out a lot of different services with very minimal or even no financial commitment. But like you said, early in my days of using AWS, one of my accounts was compromised, and they ran like a Bitcoin miner or something. I got a bill for like $9,000.
Yeah.
So luckily, Amazon has really good customer service, and that sort of took care of that. But in some cases, you'd be on the hook for that, so you have to be careful.
Yeah, absolutely. Be careful. You can add limits into how stuff grows, right? It's elastic for a reason, right? It's to help you scale quickly without having to do a whole lot of work. But on the backside of that, just make sure it's set up properly, right? And typically, I can't say this, on the record, but it is true. AWS is really about customers, right? So they will do what's right. And before we go to the next question, another thing that we see too is, right, if there's a DDoS attack, things like that, there's tools that we have built in that will automatically scale your infrastructure so that you don't get hit, right? So like Shield Advanced is one that protects us for DDoS. So typically, right, a DDoS attack, you're getting hit and it's just overloading all your servers. Well, the nice thing with the cloud is with that service, it automatically expands and expands and expands and expands. Right, while we're trying to mitigate that threat, your service doesn't go offline. So it's a way to help with other types of attacks.
Well, we talked about cost several times here already, and so one of the things in my first conversation with AWS is, what's it's going to cost. And the first thing they say is, well, spin it up and find out. Obviously, that's not a good way to run a business. And you can put budgets in place, and that's great, but if you hit a budget, and you still have to run your business, and or services need to be shut down because of something like what's happening there, do you see any time in the future? What I see happening in the Azure AWS space is that it's getting more and more transactional. So they're trying to hit you for every single thing that happens instead of based on for instance, a compute engine. Right. And scaling that from a small business point of view, right? We're sitting back here going, okay, wait a minute. How many transactions am I going to have this month? Well, I don't know. And so do you see any simpler model for pricing happening in the future, or do you see it just getting more and more transactional and the small businesses are just going to have to say, okay, well, I don't know what my bill will be next month, but we'll go ahead and see? Because that's a horrible business methodology. It's great for AWS and Azure. They can, I mean, our bills sometimes have went to $9,000, $10,000 because we're trying something new and we don't know what it's going to look like until we put reservations in place or what case.
Yeah, it's a good time for them playing like funeral music behind me, talking about pricing. Yeah, so there's a couple tools, and I would say I can't really speak to all of that, right? Because again, I'm not directly involved with the sales component of it. There's AWS budgets, there's Cost Explorer, right? There's ways to build and put those kind of forecasts in there to help you budget it out. So there's tools for some of that. There's also ways that you can sign contracts with the, either direct or through indirect channels, right? That will allow for more streamlined, or more budgetable friendly, right, cost. I would say, to be honest, I would talk to your sales rep, right, and your sales engineer, solutions architecture to kind of dive into that a little bit more. They should have the answers, and we'll be able to help you out. And if you don't know who that is, let me know, and we'll track them down and pin them down. Is it food time?
It's close. We gotta give away free stuff first.
Sweet.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you. All right. First to your shirts. Draw 3. All right. Actually, this is the third one she drew out, so I better not do that one first. All right, number 184. All right, T-shirt. Number 156, T-shirt. You already have one of these T-shirts? I tell you what. You don't have a T-shirt? I had a T-shirt years ago. Oh. And then for the earbuds, 109. Oh, Perry. All right, we are getting real close to lunch. When we dismiss, I want to make sure that food is ready, that when we get in line for the buffet's there. So hang out in the outside the ballroom. That's where we'll be going next, and we'll make sure that they're ready. They were about ready when I walked in here, but I want to make sure we don't stress them out when we all come through the doors like a stampede. But we will be in the ballroom for the rest of our event. We will, once we go in, go through the buffet lines. There's not assigned seating. Sit anywhere you want. And then once we get through the line, everybody gets time to eat a little. Then we'll start the program in there. Before we dismiss, any comments or questions or anything? All right, when we get out there, I'll yell make some gesture, yell loud, something to make sure y'all know when it's time to eat. Follow Drew.